Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku becomes the new Ghostrider, and got Harem with Momo and Shiozaki, part 4. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, TheSmilingMask, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's begin the video. You are playing a dangerous game, Principal Nizu. The small humanoid animal looked at the man in front of him without batting an eyelid. Certainly not. As dangerous as you want me to believe, Commissioner General. Not only did you give a known criminal a chance to attend this school, but you're also protecting him after what happened the other day, said the man, narrowing his eyes. He killed at least 40 people in just an hour. We cannot ignore this too. And I can't ignore a student in trouble, replied Nizu, keeping up the staring contest. This school helps the new generation, and if I give him to you I would betray his trust, as well as the trust of all the students who have walked the corridors of this building. He's a killer. He's a young boy who can kill dozens of people with a snap of his fingers without remorse, not to mention all those who ended up in a coma because of him. There are other vigilantes out there who have blood on their hands, and yet I don't seem to see you so focused on them. Nizu raised a paw to stop him before he could speak. He also saved a lot of people, and it's an undeniable fact. The Commissioner General remained impassive. He's a student who has killed people. Even with your authority, and the good reputation, and the power of this school, you cannot protect him. A long heavy silence reigned in the office for several interminable minutes, until Nizu sighed. Very well. If that's what the police want, then I'll give him to you. But before that, with fast movements of his fingers, Nizu typed something on the keyboard of his computer before writing something on a piece of paper. Then pushed the paper sheet towards the Commissioner General, who raised an eyebrow and seeing that there were 4 series of numbers. Those are the phone numbers of Buru Ajui, Ganma Ajui, Saori Yayorozu, and Hanzo Yayorozu. They are the parents of Tsuyu Ajui and Momo Yayorozu, 2 students from Class 1A. Explained Nizu, looking at the man with unreadable eyes. I want you to call them, one by one, and tell them that the boy who saved their daughters from a group of villains, who were ready to do their worst with them, will be taken to a maximum security prison because he stopped the aforementioned villains by killing them. Although imperceptibly, the man squeezed a sheet of paper in his hand. Do you think I don't have the courage to do it? On the contrary, I think you have no difficulty making a few calls, but I'm sure that all 4 of these people, at a certain point, will ask you the question, would you act in the same way if your daughter was in danger? Said Nizu without missing a beat, enjoying the brief flash of emotions that passed in the eyes of his interlocutor. After a few seconds of silence, the Commissioner General put the paper on the desk. Last chance. It will not matter to me about the situation, the motivation, or his condition. If he breaks the law again, he will end up in jail. And with that, he left the office. Nizu sighed before leaning against the back of his armchair. Izuku Midoriya, really a problematic student, looked at a calendar hung on the wall before smiling. Time to show that the flame of a true hero burns inside you. USJ, Class 1A/. Meanwhile, the sports festival? Repeated Mina with her head tilted to the side. Aizawa-sensei, we just had that villain attack. Are you sure about this? Asked Hanta with uncertainty. It's necessary to demonstrate that UA's crisis management protocols are sound. That's the thinking apparently, explained Shota through the bandages that covered his entire face. Compared to past years, there will be 5 times the police presence. Anyhow, our sports festival is the greatest opportunity you'll get. It's not an event that can be cancelled over a few villains. But there was that villain with the mask who injured All Might, said Tora, looking at their teacher. He too was taken into consideration, which is why many heroes will be summoned to strengthen security, said Shota without any change of emotion in the voice. Our sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. The Olympics were once the world's sports festival. The whole country would be whipped into a frenzy over them. But, as you know, that tradition has shrunk in scale to a shell of its former self. And, as far as Japan's concerned, what's taken the place of the Olympics is the UA's sports festival. The nation's top heroes will all be watching, right? Asked Momo. They'll be there, as scouts. Shota nodded. Naturally, you'll gain valuable experience and popularity if you're picked up by a big-name hero, but your time is limited. Show the pros what you're made of here, and you'll make futures for yourselves. He looked at each of the students, noting the determination in the eyes of most of them. This happens once a year, so you've got 3 chances. If you're hoping to become a hero, this is an event you can't miss. UA's hallways/lunch break. You were really motivated a little while ago, Uraraka, said Izuku, walking alongside her, and Tenya. It's the first time I see you like that. Oh well, you know this is an important occasion for us. Aizawa-sensei said that if we want to become heroes this event will be very useful, replied Ochiko while scratching the back of her head. Izuku looked at her for a moment before asking, I know it's a sudden question, but I wondered why you want to become a heroine. Is there a particular reason? She seemed embarrassed, looking away, but then answered, money. Izuku and Tenya looked at her with surprised eyes. Money? Sorry, I know it seems base, and it's really embarrassing, considering Iida's noble motivations and all. Why? Tenya looked perplexed. There's really nothing wrong with seeking a more comfortable lifestyle. Yeah, a lot of people have become heroes for money. Even Bakugo, as I recall, wanted to be a hero for the money, said Izuku with a shrug. My family runs a construction company, but business is bad. We're poorer than poor. My idea was to work with them. With my quirk they could have saved money on the use of vehicles for moving materials, but my father said they would be happier if I had followed my dreams. Achiko looked at them with incredibly determined eyes. So I'm gonna be a hero. I'll make that money so that my mom and dad can have easier lives. Izuku and Tenya looked at her in silence, surprised by her determination, and the bespectacled student also began to applaud while complimenting her. But then suddenly from behind a corner popped out All Might. Oh, young Midoriya, found you, said the hero before showing a lunch basket. Wanna eat lunch with me? And while Achiko almost choked on her own saliva, Izuku arched an eyebrow. What's this about? Thought Izuku before nodding. I'll see you two later. Enjoy your meal. Tenya and Achiko looked at their friend while he walked away with All Might before heading to the canteen. Soon after, they were in line to get some ramen. Wonder what he wants with Izuku, said Achiko looking at her friend. Apparently Midoriya tried to fight against that masked villain. Maybe it's about that, hypothesized Tenya before adding maybe All Might wants to talk to him about how he lost control again. Maybe, but it could also be for some help with his training. During the entrance exam, when Izuku destroyed the giant robot he shouted Hell Smash, said Achiko with a smile. Perhaps All Might has taken a liking to him. While they kept talking, either of them noticed that they were eavesdropped by Shoto a few meters away. UA break room / meanwhile. Only 1 hour? Yes, I did some tests tonight and yesterday, said All Might, pouring tea into 2 cups. If I stay in my muscle form without doing anything I can last even more than an hour. But if I fight or use the remains of One for All, I can last up to an hour, as long as I don't decide to exceed my limit. In that case I think I'd barely last 20 minutes. I see Izuku looking down for a moment. The clash with All for One has caused you a lot of damage? More than expected, but by tomorrow I will be as good as new, except for my quirk. If I hadn't attacked to counter his attacks, I'd have risked to remain with both arms unusable. All Might sipped his tea. But enough of that. I wanted to talk to you about the sports festival. Do you know how it works? Yes, of course, nodded Izuku. The members of the support course, business course, general studies, and hero course are all thrown together. We're grouped by grade level, and we compete in a series of preliminary competitions. The winners of those move on to the main event, which is always some kind of tournament. Exactly, so it's your chance to gain mass appeal for yourself, said All Might pointing at Izuku. Said boy stared at him for a few seconds. He says, shouted All Might, falling back with a jet of blood from his mouth. I don't want to destroy your castle in the clouds, but I remind you that I'm not exactly an unknown face, besides being already famous for the wrong reasons, said Izuku with a calm voice. I wouldn't be surprised if there were scouts whose purpose is only to identify any weaknesses in my quirk. You're all too paranoid, you know? Asked All Might before sighing while still lying on the ground. However, I can't blame you. Following your line of thoughts, I guess nobody will cheer for you. But that's not the point. Your aim is to make it clear to all of Japan that you are not a ruthless killer. By now everyone already knows of the attack at the USJ, and the fact that you have helped to repel those villains. Now you have to go for the final blow, and make them understand that you are just a student who wants to give the best of himself. I don't know if your idea will give good results, but I'll try, said Izuku, sipping his tea before looking at the pro hero. Do you want me to help you get up? Yes, please. Yue, Gamma Gym / 1 hour later. This place is huge, shouted Aijiro, looking around. So this is where we'll strengthen our quirks? Asked Kyoka, looking at their sensei just when another person, Cementos, made his entrance. That's correct, nodded Cementos while changing the shape of the ground. This is my personal facility. I can fashion whatever terrain or objects I believe best suit each individual student. As I said, such training is usually reserved for a specific training camp, but after recent events it is better to be sure that you are ready, explained Shota before adding, as soon as Cementos has created the platforms, start working. You must be able to understand the limits of your quirks and how you can overcome them. For the next 3 hours, the various students continued to train with their quirks, trying to improve themselves. While for some of them it was pure physical exercises, as with Tenya and Mashireo, others tried to overcome the limits imposed by their quirk, like Achiko with her nausea, and Denki with the amount of electricity that he could discharge before finding himself with a fried brain. However, unlike all of them, Izuku had moved away from the rest of the class to try and master some aspects of his quirk, such as creating chains from his flames, but nevertheless his efforts weren't giving positive results. I can perfectly control my flames, but as soon as I try to convert them into something different, I lose control over them, thought Izuku, looking at the flaming sphere in his hands with his empty sockets. Hearing someone walking behind him, he turned and saw Momo approach him while she ate some pastries. Yaoyorozu nodded Izuku to greet her. Are you taking a break? Yes, Aizawa-sensei tried to make me eat several desserts while creating more complex or larger objects, explained Momo before eating another pastry. But my body has reached its limit, and now I can no longer create objects without errors. I thought the limit of your quirk was the presence of fat in your body. Yes, but my body is different. The quirks are a bit like mere muscles, and my quirk affects my whole body particularly, since it's subjected to continuous assimilation of food and fat burning. After a while it can no longer keep up with my quirk, and the objects I create have some flaws. Momo lifted a hand and created what looked like a simple pencil, but once created, the pencil broke in half. A defect that often happens is that objects created with my quirk become more fragile. I see Izuku looking at the pencil before asking, how do you create those objects? Hypothetically, your quirk and a part of mine work the same way. You use the fat of your body, while I use the flames, but I still cannot convert the flames into objects. Momo seemed to think about it. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I have to know how an object is made to create it. I need to know how every single object is composed at the molecular level. Izuku stared at her for a couple of seconds. Are you telling me that you know the atomic composition of every single object you create? Well, I don't want to brag, but yes, I had to study a lot. But in the end I learned the whole periodic table of elements by heart, and I always carry your dictionary with me. Your what? Izuku watched with hidden amusement, as her cheeks turned slightly pink. Without saying anything, Momo took a book that was stuck at the base of her back, and gave it to Izuku. The boy began to leaf through the book, observing with interest all the chemical formulas, notes, and explanations written by Momo for all the objects listed in that book. After a few minutes, he gave back the book, color, and I was impressed. I've never seen detailed notes like these. I think you're perhaps the smartest person I've ever met. Thanks. She put the book in its place with her cheeks still pink. You could try using a method that I used as a child. When she saw him tilt his head to the side, she added, when I was learning to use my quirk, I tried to create simple objects by mentally repeating the object's name while focusing on the chemical formula of that object. With a chain I should always think chain, imagining iron. Izuku looked at his hands before creating a sphere of fire. Closing his eyes, he began to think of a chain, but not being able to imagine the chemical composition, he began to remember every time he had used the chain to fight. The weight, the feeling of having it around the chest or the arm, the movements that he used to hit his opponents, the feeling of the metal between his hands, and the moments when he set the chain on fire to make it a lethal weapon. Next to him, Momo watched Izuku in silence, and a small smile formed on her lips, as soon as she saw the flames swirl slowly, as a chain began to be created from the palm of his right hand, one ring at a time. She still couldn't know if he had used her own method, but to see that her advice had given good results filled her chest with pride. However, a few seconds later, the flames began to disperse, and the chain fell to the ground. Sorry, I lost concentration. His voice was hoarse, and not human at all, but Momo seemed to notice a note of unease. Are you okay? Did something happen while you were creating the chain? I can't use your own trick, so I started thinking about all the times I used the chain to fight. Explained Izuku, picking up the chain from the ground. Momo seemed to understand almost immediately. From what little she knew of his past, he had become famous, as well as for his appearance, because of his motorcycle, and his weapon, a chain, and since his enemies ended up in a coma or were found dead, if they were found, it was clear that he had caused much pain and death with that chain. Sorry, I shouldn't have suggested that method. Izuku waved at her. It's not your fault. It's me who decided to rethink those things. At least I managed to create something, and it is only your merit. After a couple of seconds, he added, if you want, maybe I can help you with your training. Momo looked at him with interest. How so? In response, Izuku created a sphere of fire in his right hand and, even though he had no lips or facial muscles, Momo had the impression that he was grinning, and she couldn't tell if it was a good or bad thing. UA, Class 1A/after school. Izuku was just putting some things in his school bag. After training at the Gamma Gym, they had returned to the classroom to put away their costumes before hearing some information from their teacher. Luckily, Shota was a man who went immediately to the point, and therefore they had finished quickly, and the bell had just been trolled. What's going on? Looking towards the entrance to the classroom, Izuku saw that the corridor was full of students intent on staring inside. The closest to the door were Achiko, Tenya, and Minoru, but the wall of people prevented them from leaving the classroom. No way out. What are they here for? Asked Mineta, looking with confusion at the students. Scoping out the competition, duh. Now get out of my way, small fly, said Katsuki with a low growl, walking toward the door. We're the kids who survived a villain attack. Makes sense they'd want to look before the sports festival. Izuku could feel that he hadn't finished yet, and in fact a few seconds later Katsuki added, no point though. Move aside, cannon fodder. Tenya karate chopped the air. Can we please not resort to calling those who don't even know cannon fodder? It's true, "We came to get a look, but you sure are modest," said a male voice behind the first row of students, and Izuku, who had walked toward the door, could see a boy with disheveled purple hair making his way through the crowd. "Are all the kids in the hero course like this one?" Huh! A vein began to throb on Katsuki's forehead, as Tenya and Achiko tried to warn the newcomer by shaking their heads and hands to tell him not to provoke their classmate further. The purple-haired student, who was slightly taller than Izuku, had a bored expression on his face. "Gotta say, I'm a little disillusioned if this is what you're offering. Those of us who didn't make it to the hero course are stuck in general studies and the other tracks. There's quite a few of us. Did you know that? Why should I care?" asked Katsuki with a glare. "Simple. Depending on the results of this sports festival, they might consider transferring us to the hero course. I understand the reverse is also possible for you." Izuku could see the shiver running down Minoru's back. "Scoping out the competition? For a general studies kid like me, this'll be the perfect chance to knock you off your pedestals. Consider this a declaration of war." "Well, this one knows how to throw a challenge," thought Izuku before hearing someone shouting behind the wall of students. "Hey, I'm Tetsu from class 1B, next door." A boy with gray hair and strange white markings around his eyes managed to get to the front row. "Heard you guys fought some villains. Wanted to find out more, but all I'm seeing is this arrogant bastard. You better not make fools of the hero of course at this thing." Katsuki stared at him unblinking, putting most of his classmates on the edge. "And where's Flaming Centaur? I want to meet him." Izuku sighed. There was no reason to keep it hidden, since in 2 weeks all of Japan would have seen his face. He walked toward the exit, passing by Katsuki, and the gray-haired student looked up at him. "Are you Flaming Centaur?" "Yes." Most of the students looked at him with shocked eyes. He had said it without even hesitating. "Good. I want to fight against you like a real man. And wait, where the hell are you going?" Tetsu had realized only a few seconds later that Izuku was leaving, with the crowd opening to let him pass. "You're ignoring me? I'm throwing a challenge, you know?" Izuku stopped for a moment, looking at him, and the purple-haired boy. "I don't care." Tetsu clenched his fists before starting to shake. "So straightforward and manly. Now I can't really lose against you." Izuku's sweat dropped at that, but then, a new voice was heard in the air, and for some reason Izuku found himself detesting the blonde who was laughing not far from him. "Acting so confident and sure of yourself. You really are one from 1A. The blonde guy looked at him with a mocking smile. "I'm Nito Monoma, and you cannot even imagine the joy that I will feel when our class will be recognized as the strongest in the school, even surpassing the snobs like you." A tense silence filled the corridor, as all the students watched Izuku waiting for an answer. Izuku stared at the blonde in front of him for a few seconds, and then walked away, leaving behind a frozen Nito who stared in front of him with the smile still on his face. The poor boy didn't expect such an answer. Shortly thereafter the various students began to disperse. Once they left the class, Achiko and others couldn't help but sigh. Those were going to be 2 very long weeks. "UA, class 1A/1 week later. A complex object to create?" asked Izuku looking at Momo while they were leaving the school. "Yes. Aizawa-sensei suggested that I improve the quality of my creations, as well as quantity, and that more complex and better designed objects would be better than simple objects," explained Momo looking forward. "I asked other people in the class, but nobody thought of anything like that. The only one who suggested something to me was Jiro, who proposed that I create an electric guitar. I did it, but I would like other proposals, even better if they are mechanical or electronic objects, or made with different materials." Izuku thought about it for a few seconds. "Do you need some project or material knowledge? It would be better, but I can try it without it, just that I don't guarantee the result." "Although good." Jiro pointed out some imperfections in the guitar, replied Momo with a little sigh. "Well, maybe there's an object you could try to create, but the projects are in the garage of my house. If you wish, I can take you there, and then take you home," said Izuku, surprising the girl. "Are you okay with this? I wouldn't cause problems. Don't worry, my guardian is working at his shop, but he won't say anything. In fact, I bet he will be very happy if you succeed in your intent," said Izuku with a little smile. "I will accept your invitation. I just have to call my mother to warn her," nodded Momo before picking up her cell phone. "Sure, join me in the underground parking when you're ready." Izuku then walked away. A few minutes later, while Izuku was already on his motorcycle, he saw Momo arrive with a smile on her lips. "She said it's okay even if she wants me home before dinner." Izuku nodded before pointing at his helmet. "Since you wanted a complicated object, try to create a motorcycle helmet." Contrary to what many believe, a helmet is not so simple and trivial to assemble. Momo picked up his helmet and began to look at it for a few seconds, then unbuttoned her uniform jacket and pulled up the shirt, showing her belly. Izuku had the decency to look the other way while a curvilinear object began to be created from her skin. After a few seconds, she asked him to give her an opinion and, looking at her, Izuku was surprised to see that the helmet she created was a combination of a classic motorcycle helmet similar to his, and the helmet of Achiko's hero costume. Not bad. Izuku looked at it from different angles, weighing it with one hand. The weight is lower than mine, but because you have used lighter materials, and the visor of your helmet covers your entire face, I would say it's a great result. Thank you. Momo smiled again before looking at her creation with uncertainty. Something's wrong? Oh no, I just need to do something. And with that, she removed the rubber band from her hair, letting it fall freely down her back. Izuku had to admit it. Momo was incredibly nicer with loose hair. After she had put on her helmet, she climbed into the saddle behind Izuku, clasping her arms around his chest. Izuku side-looked at her first time on a motorcycle. Why yeah, I've always traveled by car, train or plane, so it's a new experience for me. Izuku nodded before starting the engine, and darting out of the parking lot at full speed, enjoying the screams of Momo behind him. He couldn't tell if they were screams of terror or excitement, but it was still fun to hear them. The trip lasted relatively little, but in the end Izuku arrived in front of the huge gate of his garage, which was big enough to hold 2 cars. Pulling out a small remote control from his jacket, he opened the gate and entered with his bike, parking it on the right while on the left there was already another much older bike. How was it? Asked Izuku looking at Momo, who was slightly trembling on her legs. It was exciting. But did you have to go so fast? Izuku chuckled a bit. If I don't go fast there is no pleasure in riding a motorcycle. After placing the helmet on a nearby cabinet, he pointed to the other bike. That's an all-original 1957 Harley-Davidson Sportster. It's the personal motorcycle of Johnny, the man who takes care of me. When I was young, and I was starting to develop my quirk, I discovered I could melt things, and the muffler of that bike was the first victim of my quirk. Johnny spent years looking for a spare muffler, but he never found one in good condition. On the wall you can see some projects. Looking in that direction, Momo saw several sheets hanging on the wall, and was stunned to see all the details and information written on them. Weight, dimensions, necessary materials, and much more. All of this just for a muffler? Asked Momo looking back at Izuku, who nodded with a smile. The bikes are his passion, and he taught me everything I know. If there were an award for those who know more about motorbikes, he would win it for sure, explained Izuku before gesturing again toward the projects. As you can see, there are several materials used to make a muffler: sheet iron, steel, stainless steel, titanium, carbon fiber, aluminium, and Inconel. I think it's a fairly complex object, and there are projects to help you. Momo walked to those projects, and began to watch them carefully, then took out a notebook from her school bag, and wrote something. The process went on for a few minutes, but in the end she put the notebook away, and unbuttoned her jacket before starting to create the muffler. It took her only a few seconds to create it, and when it was complete, she gave it to Izuku. What do you think? Oh, I will not judge it, chuckled Izuku before sending a message with his cell phone. She looked at him confused, but soon after the garage door opened, and a man with reddish blonde hair entered, looking at them. What's the problem, Izuku? Asked Johnny looking at the young boy before shifting his gaze to the muffle. Is that true? You can thank her. She is a classmate of mine, said Izuku while tossing him the muffle. Johnny took it before he began to scrupulously observe it, 1 inch at a time, while Momo looked at him with a mixture of surprise and confusion. The only time I saw someone behave like that was in a museum when art critics were watching my mother's new sculpture. After some endless minutes, Johnny looked at Momo. What's your name, young miss? Momo Yaoyorozu. She bowed in front of him. It's a pleasure to meet you. Johnny passed the muffler to Izuku before walking in front of Momo, putting his hands on her shoulders. Momo could see that the man was trembling, and had the impression that she had done something wrong. The muffler wasn't good? She shouldn't have created one without permission? You'll be a perfect daughter-in-law. Momo's face immediately turned red, and, next to her, even Izuku's cheeks changed color, and smoke was literally coming out of his skin. Johnny, what? The man looked at Izuku with a happy face. Today, not only did you bring home a beautiful girl, but she also created a perfect muffler for my bike. This day could not be better. He took the muffler back from Izuku, and left the garage, but not before winking at the younger boy. Make sure things do not get too hot. I'm not ready to be a grandfather. He had to quickly close the door before being hit by a ball of fire that left a black mark on the wooden surface. An awkward silence had fallen into the garage, and neither Izuku nor Momo had the courage to look at each other. Sorry about him. And not a problem. He seems very lively, said Momo, trying to think about something else. She could very well see that, apart from their love of motorcycles, Izuku and Johnny had nothing in common. Since she had known Izuku, Momo had never heard of his parents, and even before, he had referred to Johnny as the one who takes care of him. So it was obvious that Izuku no longer had his parents, or perhaps he had never had them. But it wasn't the right time to ask him something so personal, and that's why she tried to change the topic. Have you made progress with the creation of chains? Oh yeah, now I can create chains long enough to fight, but it still takes time, and concentration. I can't create one on the spot without thinking, explained Izuku, but I guess that in time I will reach your level. Momo nodded, happy to know that he was striving to improve. I am sure that you will succeed. I would also like to thank you for helping me today. Even if a helmet and a muffler will not help me a lot in combat, they have been excellent items for training. Izuku smiled back. You're welcome. Do you need help with something else? Well, actually there's one thing you can help me with, and it's about what you showed me a week ago. I think you can help me because you are very resistant. Oh, what is it? It's about something I'm trying to create from scratch. But before that she looked at him with a mixture of nervousness and insecurity on her face. Can I set you on fire? UA Sports Festival Stadium, 1A Prep Room, / 1 week later. Is everyone good and ready? The event's about to begin, shouted Tenya while the rest of his classmates were trying to stay calm. The great moment had arrived after all. For 2 weeks each of them had trained beyond their limits, and now it was time to show the results of their efforts. Wish I could use my costume, groaned Mina sitting with some of her friends. They're not allowed, in the interest of fairness, said Mashireo at her side. After all, only those in the hero course have a real costume. We will have to make ourselves noticed with our style and our skill, said Hanta, shooting a pose. Yeah, there are a lot of pro heroes out there, nodded Aijiro. We must impress them. Not far away, Izuku was sitting while reading something on his cell phone when someone approached him. Midoriya. Looking up, Izuku was surprised to see the person with whom he had talked less from the start of the school, Todoroki. What is it? Shoto stared at him in silence for a few seconds before speaking. Honestly speaking, I cannot say if I am stronger than you. However, I am more capable. Izuku slightly narrowed his eyes. All Might's got his eyes on you, doesn't he? Now, I'm not about to pry into why that is, but I will beat you. Oh, a declaration of war from Todoroki? Said Denki, looking at them with a grin while the rest of the class waited in silence. Hey man, why pick a fight now? Asked Aijiro, putting a hand on Shoto's shoulder. We're about to go on. Shoto shrugged him off. I really don't care. I'm not pretending to be anyone's friend here. He looked back at Izuku. That's why, even if you're the famed flaming centaur, I'll beat you. You will need more than a few words to intimidate me, said Izuku, standing up. And let me tell you something. From my point of view, you are the one who most of all is taking this opportunity the wrong way, as if it were just a game. Now, the two of them were glaring at each other, and just when some of the others were approaching to stop a possible fight, the sound of a bell echoed in their room. It's time to go. Let's move. We cannot be late and make a bad impression, shouted Tenya, pointing with both hands toward the exit door. Izuku and Shuto stare at each other for a couple of seconds before walking outside with the rest of the class. From the end of the corridor, they could hear the screams of the spectators along with the deafening voice of President Mike. It's UA's sports festival, the one time each year when our fledgling heroes compete in a ruthless grand battle. President Mike raised his hands before pointing at one of the entrances. First up, you know who I'm talking about. The miraculous rising stars who brushed off a villain attack with their steely willpower. The first years of the hero course. He took a deep breath, and when the students started going out, he shouted even louder, it's Class 1A. Wow, what a crowd, said Mina and all, looking around. And we're expected to put on the best performance we can in front of so many spectators, added Tenya, catching her attention. I suppose this is merely one more necessary skill if we hope to become heroes. Meanwhile, all the other classes of the first year began to go out one after the other, and all the students, who had to be 220, approached the stage set up in the middle of the stadium, where there was a woman with long dark hair armed with a whip. Now for the athlete's oath, said Midnight, lashing the air with his whip. Your student representative is from Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku seemed surprised at having been chosen, but then thought that they had decided so based on the results in the entrance exam. He walked slowly on the stage, going to the microphone prepared by Midnight. I might as well use this opportunity to take a weight off my shoulders. His body was immediately devoured by the flames, shocking the whole crowd. Good luck to everyone. But if we ever fight one against the other, I hope you'll put up a good fight. A surreal silence followed his words, as Izuku returned to his spot and changed into his human form again. Some of the other students were watching him with eyes full of fear, but everyone in his class, as well as those in Class 1B, didn't seem too shocked by his words. And the same could be said for that purple-haired boy who stared at him with bored and vaguely surprised eyes. Those were really warm words. I'm feeling so hot after hearing them. No one seemed to hear her puns now. Without any delay, let's get the first event started. A screen lit up behind her. These are the qualifiers. It's at this stage that so many are sent home crying every year. And the fateful first event this year is when she snapped her fingers, and 3 words were shown on the screen. Obstacle course race. A race between every member of all 11 classes. The course is a 4-kilometer lap around the stadium itself. A wall began to open thanks to various mechanisms, showing a narrow passage to the outside of the stadium with a traffic light positioned at the top and in plain sight. Our school preaches freedom in all things, so, as long as you don't go off the course, anything is fair game," said Midnight with a sadistic smile before nodding toward Present Mike, who grinned. A red light lit up as all the participants prepared to run. "Racers, to you positions!" A second red light lit up, and Izuku noticed how many of the students were trying to get away from him slowly. "Ready." A third red light lit up before all three turned green. "Start." All the students rushed at the same time towards that passage, but in a few seconds almost everyone noticed how that narrow gate was actually the first filter. Already in the first position, Shoto didn't waste any time, and immediately began to use his quirk, freezing the ground behind him, succeeding in blocking at least 30 participants who remained with their feet stuck in the ice. However, after a few moments, someone shouted, "Too easy, Todoroki." Looking behind, he saw many of his classmates avoid his attack in a variety of ways, overcoming a large number of opponents at the same time. "I ain't letting you get ahead that easy, half and half," shouted Katsuki, flying over the others thanks to his explosions with Mom and Aijiro close behind. "I expected it from our class, but more made it past than I thought would," noted Shoto, still running ahead of everyone. Shortly behind him, some students tried to use their quirks to stop Shoto, but were immediately swept away by robots that had suddenly appeared. "Multiple targets acquired. The faux villains from the entrance exam?" shouted Denki, looking at the various robots in front of them. "Every obstacle course needs obstacle, starting with the first barrier," shouted Present Mike just when huge shadows loomed over the participants' Robo Inferno. "The 0-pointers from the exam? Seriously? The hero course kids fought against those. Too many. There's no way past." "So these are the faux villains they use for everyone else's test?" asked Shoto before crouching on the ground. "Kinda wish they'd prepared something a little more threatening." Two of the giant robots raised a fist, and then tried to hit Shoto, who was closest to them, especially because dear old Dottie's watching. And with a simple movement of his right arm, Shoto froze the two robots, blocking them in a few seconds, before running among them to move forward. "He stopped them," shouted a student behind him. "We can get through that gap." "Bad idea," warned Shoto without looking back. "I froze them in pretty unstable positions." At that moment, the robots began to be crossed by several cracks before collapsing to the ground, crushing many students with their weight, so they'd fall. One as Todoroki, busting through and sabotaging the others in one move. "This guy's cold," shouted Present Mike, adding a pun at the end. "He's way ahead of the pack. Almost feels unfair. Hey, there are kids pinned under there. They've gotta be dead. I didn't know we could be killed during this thing." In a few moments, from under the robot's remains, Aijiro and Tetsu punched their way out, and they had managed not to suffer damage thanks to their quirks, which were very similar to each other, almost identical. Around them, most of the students began to ally with each other to advance, while others preferred to avoid any kind of confrontation, using their quirks to move beyond the robots without fighting them. Not far away, Izuku, who had once again turned into a flaming skeleton, had just destroyed two smaller robots with physical strength alone. A sudden explosion caught his attention, and he saw one of the 0-pointers fall backwards after being hit on the head by a cannonball, courtesy of Momo, who had just created the artillery weapon. "It seems that several students in my class are progressing without problems," thought Izuku was looking around. From what he could see, only the weaker ones like Koji, Minoru, and Toru had stayed with the bulk of the students. Todoroki has probably already arrived at the second obstacle. Izuku destroyed a 3-pointer with a well-placed ball of fire. "If I want to reach him, I could use a method similar to Bakugo, but I don't have the same mastery of the air movement as him, so I would only risk wasting time." He grabbed a 1-pointer's head, ignoring the fist that came to his head. "If I really want to get there first, I need a vehicle." He looked at the robot which was trying to break free from his grip, and an idea began to form in his mind. Why not? Without wasting any more time, Izuku grabbed the robot's head with both hands and let his flames cover it entirely. Under his pleased gaze, he saw the robot's body grow darker as it began to transform. The sphere that the robot used to move narrowed into a huge spiked wheel wrapped in flames, while its body began to lengthen to form a sort of saddle, with its head that moved in front of the saddle, with two handlebars that came straight out of the robot's head, now more similar to the demonic skull of a goat with fire coming out of its sockets. Finally, the two arms of the robot lowered to the height of the wheel with the hands pointing upwards. Satisfied with the result, Izuku jumped into the saddle and put his feet on the hands of the robot, which hooked around the base of his boots, so as not to make him fall, while he grabbed the handlebars. After a trial acceleration, Izuku darted forward at full speed past several students who looked at him with shocked eyes. This may be funny in the end. In a few moments, Izuku found himself at the base of a long staircase, but that didn't stop him, and he continued to climb, destroying all the steps behind him before arriving in front of a series of concrete columns connected to each other with thick ropes. Looking around, he saw that many students were already crossing the chasm below, although some didn't have much skill, thus falling into the darkness. "It seems that our fiery runner has found a means of transport," But now he's also facing the second obstacle, the fall. Will he be able to overcome it? Not a problem. Without hesitation, Izuku accelerated again, driving toward the chasm, and, much to everyone's surprise, he completely missed the rope in front of him, darting through the air. Their surprise grew again when his wheel touched one of the concrete columns, but instead of falling down, he managed to drive upward, as if there were no gravity. With a final leap, he landed on the second column, looking for a moment behind him. Luckily I managed to learn how to drive on vertical surfaces. I still don't understand how it is possible, but I will certainly not stop here to answer those questions. And with that, he darted back into the air, aiming for a third column. It seems that even this kind of obstacle cannot stop him. After a short pause, Present Mike added, meanwhile, the leaders of the pack move on undaunted. Reaching a new column, Izuku saw that Katsuki had reached Shoto, and was now close to surpassing him. Continuing with his method, he managed to get to the other side of the chasm in a short time when explosions were heard ahead of him. Having now solid earth under the wheel, Izuku managed to gain a lot of ground on the students in front of him, overcoming a large number in a few seconds, thus managing to catch the third place right at the beginning of the third obstacle, a minefield. Midoriya. Looking back, Izuku saw that the student right behind him was Tenya. I won't lose against you in a speed contest. Izuku looked forward again, noting how Katsuki was flying through the air with his explosions to surpass Shoto, while Present Mike was explaining aloud the characteristics of those mines. If you really want to do a speed race, Izuku created 2 large fireballs in his hands. You must first prepare the route. And with that, he threw the 2 spheres of fire, aiming directly at Katsuki and Shoto, who were forced to throw aside to avoid the attacks, but were still thrown to the ground due to all the explosions caused by the fireballs that had destroyed the mines below. Just as Izuku was ready to accelerate to reach the finish line, Tenya managed to get to his side. Using that move now could cost me a lot, but I cannot let him win without even trying, thought Tenya, as blue flames began to come out of its engine's reciprocal bursts. In an explosion of speed, Tenya dashed forward with Izuku, who was particularly surprised to see him go so fast. The two of them crossed the entire field in a few moments while Shoto and Katsuki were still getting up, but Shoto saw them coming and managed to create a huge wall of ice in front of them to stop their advance. However, his plan failed because Izuku rammed the wall with his vehicle, destroying it without slowing down. Could only look with surprised eyes as Izuku entered the tunnel for the stadium with Tenya at his side. You're really fast. Tenya looked at his side, where Izuku was waving at him, but not enough, before accelerating even more, managing to distance Tenya. Now I can understand why you never told me about when you lost to him, brother, thought Tenya while still running at the best of its ability. He's just too fast. After having destroyed half of the minefield, and having reached the first position, the one who made it back to the stadium first, Present Mike shouted before pointing at the tunnel entrance just when a flaming motorbike darted out of it, none other than Izuku Midoriya. And, much to Izuku's surprise, the crowd exploded into screams and applauses for him while the other runners arrived one after the other. They're cheering for me? Thought Izuku, looking around before spotting Almighty, who was grinning at him. After this he will never leave me alone again. Shortly after, Izuku returned in human form, and the robot fell to pieces, emitting sparks from different points. To lose a race, of all things, with my quirk, said Tenya behind him. It's clear I still have progress to make. Don't be so hard on yourself, replied Izuku, patting his back. You came second, and I think it's a great result to start. If it hadn't been for those robots, I probably wouldn't have arrived first. Midoriya, that was awesome, shouted Achiko, walking toward them while catching her breath. You and Iida stole everyone's attention during the final part. Well, I guess so, mumbled Izuku before looking at the tunnel just in time to see Momo running inside the stadium, with Minoru attached to her ass thanks to his quirk. Unbeknownst to him, Achiko and Tenya were now looking at him with worried eyes. Midoriya, are you okay? Yes, why? Asked Izuku without looking at them. Your right arm is wrapped in flames, said Achiko, pointing at said limb. I'm fine. I was just thinking of doing something to someone, Izuku replied with narrowed eyes, and both his friends took a step away from him. But luckily, before anything could happen, Midnight's voice was heard in the air. So it's finally over. Let's check the results. And, as she said it, the various names, positions, and photos of the participants began to appear on the various screens of the stadium. The top 42 from this qualifying round will move on, but for those who place lower, don't worry. We've got another way for you to show your stuff. The students who had not appeared on the screen sighed down before they left, leaving those who had qualified near the stage. It seems that all our classmates have managed to qualify, and the same could be said for those in Class 1B, noted Tenya, looking around. The other two who managed to pass are that purple-haired, from the General Studies boy, and that pink-haired girl, from the support course. And now the main selection really begins. The press corps is going to be jumping out of their seats, so give it all you've got, shouted Midnight, as the monitor behind her became completely white now, For the second event she snapped her fingers, and 2 words appeared on the screens in the stadium cavalry battle. The various students looked at each other, wondering what a test of that kind would entail. Participants will, on their own, form teams of 2 to 4 members each, and get into a horse and rider formation. The rules are fundamentally the same as those of an ordinary cavalry battle. Snag your opponent's headbands while guarding your own. But with one exception, she pointed at the students with her whip. Each of you has been assigned a point value based on your ranking in the last event. Your individual point values start at 5, at the bottom. So the student who took 42nd place is worth 5 points, 41st is worth 10 points, and so on. Get it? But our first place participant is worth 10 million points. 41 heads turned at the same time to Izuku, who continued to observe Midnight, though a drop of sweat ran down his cheek. The higher-ranked students are the ones to aim for. This survival game is a chance for a comeback. It's anyone's game, explained Midnight with a sadistic smile. There's more suffering ahead for those at the top. As you must have heard countless times since enrolling at UA, this is plus ultra. Talking about pressure, thought Izuku felt the stars of everyone on him. The match will last 15 minutes. Each team's points are determined by its members. The rider will wear a headband displaying the total number of points. Until the match ends, you'll all compete to grab each other's points and maintain the ones you have. Out of nowhere, she pulled out a headband, showing it to the students. Any headbands you grab must be worn around the neck or higher, but the more headbands you've got, the harder they'll be to manage. Most importantly, even if your headband is taken, and even if your horse formation is broken, it's not over till it's over. The various students began to discuss briefly among themselves, talking about the possible teams and stolen points, but Midnight silenced them with a whiplash. Quirks are allowed, so it'll be a brutal battle. However, it's still a cavalry battle. Maliciously attacking another team with the intent of making them fall will get you a red card, and that means you're out of the game. She grinned at them. You've got 15 minutes. Time to form your teams. Looking around, Izuku immediately realized that he was alone, but at that moment he had other things on his mind, so he approached Midnight to ask her something. While a few meters away from him, someone was already at work. Hitoshi Shinso, right? Said purple-haired boy, turned to look at Nito Monoma, who was showing a strange smile on his face. I saw what you did during the first event. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow when Nito held out his hand. So, would you like to form a team? 2 brainwashing quirks are better than 1, don't you think? After a few seconds of silence, Hitoshi grinned. Sure, why not? Meanwhile on the stage, Midnight grinned at Izuku. I like your style. Yes, what you're planning is allowed since it's a part of your quirk. Izuku nodded before looking back, just to find himself face to face with the pink-haired girl from the support course. Team up with me, Mr. First Place. The boy looked at her with surprised eyes, asking who she was. I'm Mei Hatsume. I don't know you, but I could be useful to someone in your position. Above all, because I saw what you did to that robot during the first event. How could you be useful to me? Asked Izuku with a curious voice. It's very simple. In the support course, we develop equipment to make heroes' quirks easier to use. I've got plenty of my babies here, and I'm sure you'll find 1 or 2 that suit you, explained Mei, showing him several gadgets made by her. Izuku looked at them for a second before nodding. Fine, you're with me. Now we need to find at least another member. And looking around, he saw Minoru trying to get Momo on his team. I just found a sad member approaching the duo. Izuku raised his voice slightly to make himself heard. Yaoyorozu, would you like to team up with me? Momo looked at him with surprised eyes, also noting Mei being Midoriya. Are you sure? Izuku nodded. Yes, I really need you. With your quirk, I'll make sure to take us to the next event. The black-haired girl smiled at him before nodding, destroying Minoru's hopes and forcing him to run towards Mizo. So, who's the 4th member? Momo asked Momo, looking at Izuku and his strange grin. No one. The 3 of us will form a team, explained Izuku, walking toward the destroyed robot he used to ride during the first event. This robot will help us. Mei looked at the robot with a smile. If you wish, I can try to repair it, but I don't have the right materials with me. How much time do you need to repair it? Asked Izuku. I'd say 10 minutes tops, nodded Mei with a grin while Izuku looked at Momo. Can you help her? Sure. What do you need, Hatsume? Asked Momo before finding herself on the wrong end of an avalanche of words. After a few seconds of listening to their teammate, Momo created all the necessary materials, adding some things requested by Izuku to improve the robot, and Mei immediately began to work. Yaoyorozu, are you okay? Asked Izuku, looking at her with concern. Yes, don't worry. She sat down on the ground, trying to catch her breath. I just have to rest for a moment. I will not be able to help you during the battle. I need food to restore my fat stocks. It'll be fine, leave it to me, and Hatsume, nodded Izuku with a little smile before looking around. The others have already formed teams. It's time to think of a strategy. By the time the 15 minutes were about to expire, Mei completed the job with a satisfied smile, and Izuku asked, you said you want big companies to see your babies at work, right? Yes, the big ones are right here. I can't miss this opportunity, nodded Mei, lifting her goggles. Good, then prepare all those who are good to defend and attack. I will take care of the movement, said Izuku before turning into a flaming skeleton, touching the robot with one hand. As the robot began to transform, Izuku looked back at his teammates. Let's ride. Your 15 minutes are up. Time to get started, said Midnight before walking away just when a loud roar was heard in the air, shocking everyone. The cause of their shock? A large, three-wheeled chopper with demonic features and inflamed wheels. The head of the chopper was similar to the skull of a bull with flames leaking from the orbits, and 6 large mufflers that, coming out from behind the saddle, pointed towards the sky, spewing smoke and flames. The saddle itself was different, as it was longer, with the back almost similar to a sofa where Momo and Mei were sitting, both of them with strange gadgets in their hands. While sitting on the saddle itself was Izuku, intent to tie the headband around his skull. It seems that Midoriya has decided to take the cavalry battle to the next level, shouted Present Mike. Let's get a battle cry. Here comes the starting signal. Blood begets blood in the UA Grand Match. Are you ready? Yes. Heh. I'll show my babies to everyone. Start. Izuku didn't even have time to accelerate, so a huge wall of ice formed in front of his chopper, separating it from the rest of the teams. This is right from the start, huh? Wondered Izuku before looking at his right, and what he saw left him genuinely surprised, because a few meters from him, there was a team with Katsuki as the rider, Shoto on the right, Tenya in front, and a girl with vines instead of her hair on the left. I'm coming for that headband, Deku. Even if you've your flames, I'll stop you. I've lost once against you, Midoriya. I won't lose again. I can feel the sins in your soul, Izuku Midoriya, and they must be destroyed. Tenya Iida, Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugo from Class 1A, and Ibra Shiozaki from Class 1B. Those from the 2nd to the 5th position have decided to join forces, and they are directly aiming to the big prize. Izuku stared at them for a moment before giving gas to his chopper. Bring it on. Joining your team? Tenya looked at Shoto with surprised eyes, not expecting such a request. From what little he understood about Endeavor's son, Shoto was one who wanted to do things on his own, especially in combat simulations, so a situation where others were looking for his help was more likely. However, he was also smart, so he must have already had a team in mind for the event. Yes, your quirk and your speed are perfect for this type of event. Shoto walked away with Tenya behind him. However, this won't be my team. What do you mean? Simply, you saw what Midoriya did during the first event. Shoto pointed at Izuku, who was talking with a pink-haired girl, and he will probably do something similar even now. In order to stop him, this team must be versatile, but strong at the same time, and that's where you come into play with your speed. Using my ice as a support, you can go even faster. Tenya looked around for a moment before asking, since you said this won't be your team, I guess you won't be the rider. Correct. As I said, this team must also be powerful, and there is someone with a quirk suitable for the purpose. But suggesting that he is part of the horse would lead him to immediately reject the proposal. For this, he will be the rider, explained Shoto, walking toward a group of their classmates. Who are you talking abo? Tenya stopped mid-sentence, pausing a bit. Team up with me. Hey Bakugo, pick me. He's picking me, of course. Come on Bakugo, let's form a team. Tenya looked at the son of Endeavor. Him, nodded Shoto, stopping behind their classmates Bakugo. Everyone turned to look at him. And Tenya, would you like to be the rider of our team? Everyone looked at him with shocked eyes except for Katsuki, who narrowed his own. Why should I join you? Half and half. You want to defeat Midoriya, don't you? Asked Shoto without missing a beat. It is likely that he will do something similar to the first event, using a vehicle transformed with his quirk. In order to stop him, you will need speed, power, and suitable terrain. While you have a powerful quirk, you do not have the speed, and you need a team that can get you close to him. He pointed at Tenya. Iida is with me, and he's the fastest in our class when Midoriya isn't using a vehicle, while I can do something to stop or slow him down with my ice. If we combine our 3 quirks, we get a team that can go fast, slow down or stop others, and destroy any defenses. Those who were listening paled in hearing Shoto's explanation, and all of them hoped that Katsuki would say no to the offer. And you want me, as the rider? Would you really give up that position? Asked Katsuki, still with narrowed eyes. Your quirk, as a part of the horse, isn't useful, but, as the rider, you've free control of your hands. A sinister grin appeared on Katsuki's face. Fine, I'll join you, but, as soon as the event is over, I will show you why you declared war on the wrong person in the locker room. Fine by me, replied Shoto without blinking. Now, who is the fucking 4th member? Snarled Katsuki while the others tried again to join him. Excuse me? A calm, but strong female voice was heard above everything, and the students of Class 1A saw a girl with vines instead of hair standing a few feet away. Forgive me, and the sin I committed, but I couldn't help listening to your speech. You want to defeat Izuku Midoriya, correct? She is the girl who has arrived in 5th position, thought Shoto before nodding. Yes, that's our goal. As soon as he said those words, all the students nearby felt a strange pressure on their shoulders. Even Shoto and Katsuki couldn't help but slightly straighten their backs, yet the girl in front of them hadn't moved. She had just imperceptibly narrowed her eyes. In that case, allow me to join you in this sacred task. She put her hands together in a symbol of prayer while closing her eyes, and, strangely enough, a strange light appeared above the girl, giving her a more sacred and important air. The sins that he has committed, which stain his soul, I can feel them, and for this I have to stop him. She opened her eyes, looking at the students in front of her, and the pressure returned stronger than before. During this event, Izuku Midoriya shall fall. UA Sports Festival Stadium /now. Deka! Katsuki screamed, trying to hit Izuku's bike with one of his explosions, but Izuku managed to avoid the shot, steering the handlebars to the right. Behind him, several vines grabbed Katsuki before putting him back on top of his horse, which continued to chase the burning vehicle. Immediately after the start of the event, Team Bakugo, Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, Tenya Iida, and Ibara Shiozaki had continued to pursue Team Midoriya, Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yayorozu, and Mei Hatsume, even managing to take the headbands of Team Kodai, Yui Kodai, and Kojiro Bando, and Team Kukadashi, Manga Fukudashi, Tagara Kamakiri, and Nairenjiki Shota. We are just at the beginning of the event, and 2 of the 12 teams in play have already lost their headbands, shouted Present Mike looking at the monitor to his side. This cavalry battle has started with a bang, and again, everyone ignored the pun about Katsuki's quirk. They are persistent, said Izuku, driving his chopper away from them. Hatsume, do you have something to slow them down? Heh. Of course I have. Mei picked up 4 little metallic spheres before throwing them on Tenaya, and the others. These babies will slow them down. And in midair, the spheres exploded, releasing a strange viscous liquid, but before it could take effect, a spike of ice was created from the ground, blocking the liquid, and allowing Tenya to run alongside the block of ice, continuing with the pursuit. They're still behind us, shouted Momo, and, looking back, she had to admit that she was impressed by the control that Shoto had on his quirk, succeeding in creating 2 trails of ice on the ground on which he and Ibara could slide, holding their feet still, while Tenya could run at full speed, without being slowed down by the ice. And they are not alone, shouted a male voice from their right, and, looking on that side, they saw Mizo running toward them all alone, with his arms forming a strange shelter on his back. From a small gap in his arms, above his head, several purple spheres were thrown, but Izuku, having recognized them, quickly moved his right arm to create a wall of flames that melted the balls in midair. Those were Mineta's dash. Izuku was interrupted when a long tongue darted towards him, aiming at his headband, but this time an iron pipe smacked the tongue away. I got it, said Momo while trying to catch her breath with the iron pipe in her hands. Nice hit, Yayorozu, said Tsuyu with her, and Minoru now visible through the gap in the arms of Mizo. Yayorozu is tired after having created all those components, and certainly everyone will be aiming for us. I must be able to avoid fighting. After all, we just need to keep our band to be sure to pass. Thought Izuku looked around, and surely enough, most of the teams were coming toward them. I only hope Hatsume and her gadgets can protect us from surprise attacks. This chopper is very big, and is an easy target. I will have to focus on speed. Watch out, shouted Momo, and, looking ahead, Izuku saw a blur darting toward them, but he managed to dodge the new opponent driving the chopper to the left. That won't save you, said a female voice with a strange accent. Momo looked back, and was surprised to see a bespectacled beast boy used as a horse with a black-haired boy and a pony girl on his back. But the strangest thing was that under the feet and hands of the beast boy there were what looked like horns, and they were giving him the opportunity to move without even touching the ground. Oh, looks like Team Rin is taking a shot at the big prize. Much to Izuku's surprise, Team Rin, Hiryu Rin, Pony Tsunatori, and Jirota Shishida managed to reach him in a few moments, and when Momo tried to hit Hiryu with her iron pipe, he raised his left arm, now covered with scales, and parried the blow without any difficulty, before pointing both arms at the chopper's wheels, shooting several scales from his hands, and even if they couldn't pierce the tires, they shook the vehicle slightly, forcing Momo to stop any attacks while Mei was trying to decide which gadget to use. Missed Tsunatori. Behind us, shouted Jirota without looking back. Said girl glanced back in his place, and saw Team Kaminari, Denki Kaminari, Mashireo Ojiro, Mina Ishido, and Yuga Aoyama try to get their headband. Gotcha, Dragon Boy. Denki reached for Hiryu's headband, but, at the last moment, Team Rin managed to accomplish a backflip, and, when they were upside down above Team Kaminari, Hiryu grabbed the headband of the blonde boy, shocking him and his team. Got you, Electric Boy, replied Hiryu with a little smirk on his face. How the hell did they do that? Shouted Denki while his team turned around to chase Team Rin. To his left, Mashireo widened his eyes. Ah, look, those horns are the same as those on Tsunatori's head. That must be her quirk, added Mina on the left. We need to slow them down. Aoyama, shoot at the ground, said Denki pointing just below Team Rin. I'll show them my beautiful sparkle, nodded Yuga before using his quirk, even if the laser completely missed the target because Team Rin had already moved to another target. They are going for Jiro, and the others, noted Denki. Watch out. Not far from them, Team Hagakure, Toru Hagakure, Kyoka Jiro, Koji Koda, and Rikito Sato, turned after hearing his scream, just in time to see Team Rin fly over them. But when Hiryu tried to get Toru's headband, Kyoka used her earlobes to hit his hand, preventing him from getting the prize. Good job, Jiro, said Toru. Now we can dash. Your quirk is being invisible, right? Asked a male voice near them. Yeah, can't you see dash? Toru shut up instantly, confusing her team, and Team Kaminari. But before they could ask her anything, the same male voice ordered her give me that headband. And much to everyone's shock, Toru grabbed her own headband and threw it to the right, where it was taken by Hitoshi, who stared at them with a small smirk on his face. Thanks. And with that, his team ran away, leaving behind two shocked teams. Hagakure, what the hell? Shouted Kyoka, looking at her teammate who, even if they could not see it, was looking around with confused eyes. What happened? Asked Toru. Where's our headband? You just handed our headband to that guy, said Kyoka with a pissed off look after them. Not far from them, Team Mineta, Minoru Mineta, Mizo Shoji, and Tsuyu Ajui was busy gathering information about the current situation, using Mizo's tentacles to look all around. It seems that for the moment most of the teams are focused on Midoriya, said the masked student before feeling something on his back. Why did he feel heavier? What the hell are these? Minoru shouted, and Mizo opened his arms to look at his teammates, just to see both of them covered in various types of mushrooms. What the dash? Mizo's surprise didn't last long because suddenly a huge hand grabbed Minoru, taking him away, and turning in that direction he and Tsuyu saw Team Kendo, Itsuka Kendo, Reiko Yanagi, Setsuna Tokage, and Kinoko Komori, with Itsuka intent on removing the headband of Minoru using her other hand. Sorry, but we need points, said Itsuka before tossing Minoru toward his team with Tsuyu, who quickly caught him with her tongue. My beautiful mushrooms will last for a few hours if you don't remove them, said Kinoko on Itsuka's right, but before Minoru or the others could reply, Team Kendo was already moving away from them. Damn it, we lost our headband, said Minoru while trying to tear away all the mushrooms, also receiving a tongue stroke for trying to remove those from Tsuyu's butt. We need to gain some points. 7 minutes have already passed, said Tsuyu looking at one of the huge screens in the stadium, and we are not the only ones in trouble, added Mizo looking around just in time to see one team from their class clashing against one from class 1B not too far from them. Uraraka is in trouble too. As mentioned by him, Team Uraraka, Achiko Uraraka, Hanta Sero, Eijiro Kirishima, and Fumikage Tokoyami was in clear difficulty against Team Aways, Yosetsu Aways, Tetsu 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 Tetsu, Juzo Hananuki, and Shirhai Kurwaru, with the rider who was just aiming at their headband. They don't want to give up, said Hanta from Chakos. We need to fight back, yelled Achiko before looking at the front of her horse Kirishima. Can you take on Tetsu Tetsu? I'll face him like a real man, nodded Eijiro with a large grin on his face, but it disappeared when he, as well as his teammates, found themselves plunging into the ground, suddenly becoming softer, almost like quicksand. We got them. Nice job, Hanazuki, shouted Tetsu Tetsu not far from them. We can't get out, said Hanta, trying to run away, but Achiko stopped him. No, turn around, quickly. Although he didn't know what she had in mind, Fumikage used his quirk, and Dark Shadow helped them turn to their opposing team. Sero, aim for your tape at Tetsu Tetsu. The black-haired boy did, as requested, and managed to attach his tape to Tetsu Tetsu's left shoulder, and he looked at them with a confused look. Wait, Uraraka, don't tell me. Hanta looked at their opponents with worried eyes before being touched on the head by his rider who was using her quirk on him. And Fumikage, rewind your tape. Kirishima, use your quirk. Got it, nodded Eijiro, hardening his whole body with the head tilted forward like a sword of ram. A few moments later, their team darted at full speed against Team Aways, taking advantage of the soft terrain, as if they were water skiing. They want to come against us like a cannonball, and thanks to Uraraka's quirk they can go much faster, thought Yosetsu with shocked eyes before screaming Tetsu Tetsu. I'm ready, shouted the front of the horse already using his quirk. I'll stop him like a real man. Moments later, the heads of Eijiro and Tetsu Tetsu impacted against each other, generating a small shock wave that made the two teams stagger, surprising all those who had witnessed the clash. Small cracks opened on the foreheads of the two boys, but, as Tetsu Tetsu and his team stumbled backwards, Team Uraraka managed to move forward. How is it possible? They are lighter, and should be more affected by the impact, thought Juzo, staring at them before noticing two details: Chako's hands, which were positioned in the way for when she wanted to cancel the effects of her quirk, and Dark Shadow, who was behind them, holding the team together. Athi also thought about this, but it will not be enough. We got this, said Ochako with a huge smile before grabbing the headband around Yosetsu's neck. But when she pulled it, the headband slipped away from her hand, remaining around his neck. Sorry, but Yosetsu grabbed her headband, managing to take it away. I merged my headband with my clothes. You can't take it. Before she could react, the ground beneath their feet became soft again and, as soon as their feet were submerged, it returned solid, locking them in place. Team Aways moved away soon after, aiming at other teams, as Present Mix's voice was heard in the air. It seems that Class 1B is showing ITS fangs, and ITS fighting spirit. You just need to look at the scoreboard to understand it. Scoreboard 1. A. Team Midoriya 100000140p. 2. B. Team Aways 1230p. 3. A. Team Bakugo 1045p. 4. B. Team Shinso 710p. 5. B. Team Kendo 645p. 6. B. Team Rin 535p. 7. A. Team Uraraka 0p. 8. A. Team Hagakure 0p. 9. B. Team Kodai 0p. 10. A. Team Kaminari 0p. 11. B. Team Fukudashi 0p. 12. A. Team Mineta 0p. Half of the teams have dropped to 0 points. Bakugo and his team are still aiming at us, and I'm sure that soon they won't be alone. Izuku looked at the scoreboard and, as expected, all 1B teams were advancing towards him in an attempt to intercept his chopper. I just need to avoid them, and we'll pass to the next phase. His vehicle suddenly began to skid and, looking down, Izuku saw that the ground had suddenly become soft, but that did not stop him from accelerating and regaining control of the chopper, also creating a wall of flame to his right to keep Team Aways away. However, a sudden gust of wind caught his attention, and, looking in that direction, he was surprised to see Team Kendo pass through a gap in his wall of flames with Itsuka already intent on reaching him with a giant hand. With a quick movement of the arm, Izuku managed to create a short chain to lash Itsuka's hand, but flying pieces struck it, protecting the girl who managed to grab him. Yet Itsuka was forced to release him immediately when the flames escaped from his body, ripping a scream of pain from her. If I were you, I wouldn't try again. Next, I won't limit myself to flames. Said Izuku, looking at her while the flying pieces went back to being the left arm of Setsuna. Midoriya, on your left, shouted Momo, catching his attention just in time for him to avoid the hand of Hiryu, who almost got the headband. However, his attention shifted to a large amount of wax-like liquid that appeared in front of them, courtesy of Team Kodai, forcing him to turn left, where he found himself in front of Team Hagakure and Team Fukudashi, and from Manga's face, a huge writing with the kanjis for steel came out, blocking the path of Izuku. What the hell is that? Thought Izuku before throwing a sphere of fire at the wall in front of him, but, much to his shock, the flames were melting the steel very slowly. Whatever it is quite resistant, and now we are surrounded. We will have to break through by force. DKU. Looking around, Izuku saw that at least 7 teams were trying to reach for his headband, and just when Team Bakugo and Team Kendo were close to colliding with them, someone stole Izuku's headband, shocking everyone. Without hesitating, they looked up, and were surprised to see Ochako floating in midair with the headband of Izuku squeezed in one hand, and a big smile on her lips. Sorry Midoriya, said Ochako before being taken away thanks to the tape of Hanta, who was waiting for her with the rest of the team. Incredible! Team Uraraka stole the grand prize right from under their noses, shouted Present Mike, with the spectators going crazy with the cheers. Most teams are using this strategy. But leaving your unit really allowed? It is here, on a technicality, nodded Midnight. As long as your feet don't touch the ground. After her, shouted Minoru, with Mizo running toward Team Uraraka with the others. But then, Ochako and her team jumped, and they jumped very high. See you later, said Hanta with a grin, as he and the rest of the team floated upward, avoiding the assault of the other teams. What an incredible move! Thanks to Uraraka's quirk, they're floating in the air, away from the competition. There are no rules against this, said Fumikage with a calm voice while Hanta fired his tape on one edge of the stadium roof. So they didn't get too far. Now we have just to wait for 5 minutes left in the game. That fucking round face, hissed Katsuki, glaring at Team Uraraka with a clear idea to go up there and destroy them. Don't do it, said Shota, looking up as well. If you go up there, we cannot help you, and Tokoyami's quirk is quite versatile in defense. We're still in 3rd position, and currently, Midoriya will not be able to enter the next phase, noted Ibara while glaring at the flaming skeleton. Since he no longer had a headband, she couldn't attack him without being expelled from the competition along with the rest of the team. You let your guard down, shouted Minoru, throwing his sticky balls at them while Mizo tried to close the distance between the teams, with Tsuyu aiming at the headbands around Bakugo's neck with her tongue. However, their plan failed when the ground was frozen, and a wall of ice formed in front of them, blocking the attacks of Minoru and Tsuyu while also immobilizing Nizo on the spot. Fucking small flies, growled Katsuki looking around. Let's just take all the headbands. Ibara looked away from Izuku, who was asking something to Mei, before noticing something. There were only 10 teams on the ground. Team Uraraka was still floating above the stadium, but there was another team that wasn't forced to the ground. Widening her eyes, she looked behind, but it was too late, and Hiryu managed to grab the headbands of Katsuki, surprising him, and the others from Class 1A. I'm sorry, Shiozaki, but we need to pass, said Hiryu with a little smile on his face before darting away with his team. They took our points. We need to take them back, said Tenya, already running after them. But while Shoto was helping him with his ice, and Ibara was looking around in search of a possible team with enough points, Katsuki was glaring at Team Rin with a murderous look. Those fuckers, I'm gonna kill them. That would be a sin without forgiveness. Shut up, plant. We need to get those points. We need to take all the points, said Katsuki with a growl. We can't just let them win like this. For once I agree with you, said Shoto, following Team Rin with his cold eyes. Katsuki slammed his right fist into his left palm, generating a little explosion half and half. Use your eyes, and create a ramp to reach those fuckers. For eyes, use the move you used before, and go, as fast as you can. Plant, take down those shitty horns. Not wanting to argue, Shoto concentrated for a moment before creating a long ice ramp, and, moments later, Tenya screamed reciprocal bursts before dashing forward at full speed. The team climbed the ramp before taking flight toward Team Rin, but Hiryu and Pony heard them coming, and at the last moment she controlled her horns to do a backflip again, finding themselves over Team Bakugo, but upside down. And it was at that moment that Team Rin's members noticed something strange. Ibara? Present. Shoto? Present. Tenya? Present. Katsuki? Missing. Where did he dash? Hiryu's words died in his throat when he saw Katsuki in front of them with a homicidal look, and smoking hands. Oh shit. Boom! The violent explosion in midair captured the attention of many who saw Katsuki fly over Team Rin with 5 headbands in his right hand before being retrieved by some green vines that brought him back to his team. On the other hand, Team Rin found themselves plummeting downwards, as Ibara had stolen Pony's horns from under Jiroda immediately after the somersault. Mist Sinatori, do something, shouted the Beast Boy while trying to adjust himself in midair before feeling the familiar sensation of Pony's horns under his hands and feet. They have anticipated our move. We must recover those points before time runs out, said Hiryu, pointing at Team Bakugo with Pony already moving her horns to chase them. Apparently they were slowing down after that explosion of speed, and it was the perfect time to attack them. However, when they were just a few yards away from them, Ibara sent her vines toward Team Rin, creating a net to stop them, and because of their speed, Pony couldn't stop her horns in time, and so they were trapped in that net of vines. Damn it! Hurry up! We need to get out of here, shouted Hiryu before suddenly feeling cold. And looking at the vines, he saw that they were being covered by a layer of hoarfrost. Looking up a little, he saw that Ibara had removed the vines from her head, and had passed them to Shoto, who was holding them with his right hand. The 3 members of Team Rin understood what was going to happen too late, and in a few moments they were almost completely frozen, remaining only with their heads out of the ice trap. It seems that Team Rin is in trouble. If they can't free themselves, there will be no way for them to recover the lost points. While Katsuki was placing the headbands around his neck, giving orders to his team, not far away another team was struggling with Izuku and his vehicle, and the situation wasn't the best. We can't slow him down, said Juzo, trying to stop Izuku's chopper with his quirk, but that vehicle was unstoppable. If I heard correctly, that pink-haired girl's quirk allows her to zoom in on what she sees. She must have seen our headbands and decided to aim for us, said Shirhai with narrowed eyes, since his quirk was useless right now. We must face them like real men. He can't just hit us with that chopper, shouted Tetsu, looking back with a fire in his eyes. He's right. We just need to be careful with Yayorozu, nodded Yosetsu before telling his team to turn back, facing the incoming vehicle, so they are no longer trying to escape. Noted Izuku before stopping the chopper. Hatsume, I'm leaving the rest to you. Hey, you can count on me. And my babies, grinned Mei, holding a strange rifle in her hands. Yayorozu? I'm ready, nodded Momo, keeping her hands under her shirt, hiding something. Good, then let's ride, shouted Izuku before driving his chopper toward Team Aways, who were waiting for them, since Juzo used his quirk to slow them down, while also running toward them with Tetsu ready to strike them. But at the last second, Mei aimed with her rifle and pulled the trigger, shooting a strange claw with 3 hooks, attached to a metal rope, that was able to hook the headbands that Yosetsu had around his neck. The black-haired boy grinned at her. I'm sorry, but those headbands are fused to my shirt. You can't take Ry up. Much to everyone's surprise, Yosetsu's shirt was ripped away with the headbands, and now Mei was holding them with one hand, a grin on her face. Never underestimate my babies. This special hook and pull could tear a door from its hinges. Izuku took advantage of their opponents' stunned faces to get away, and create a wall of flame around them, just as several teams were heading towards them for their points. Itsuka used her giant hands again to wipe out the fire, and Yui grew larger on Kojiro's shoulders to use the same technique, while Mina sprayed her acid at the base of the flames to try to turn them off, and Shoto used the same technique, but with his ice. However, when they managed to create gaps in the flames, they were shocked to see that now, around the forehead and neck of Izuku, there were over 40 headbands, all the same between them. What the dash? Kyoka looked at him before shifting her gaze toward Momo. You used your quirk to create duplicates. Momo showed a little smile. It's not against the rules after all. I'll simply take all of them, shouted Katsuki, launching himself against Izuku with the other teams following his example. We still have to fight them off for a few seconds, thought Izuku, looking for a moment at one of the giant screens in the stadium before using his arm to block one of Katsuki's explosions and push him away, watching as he was caught by Ibara's vines, which then tried to aim for his head and take several headbands, but Izuku managed to grab some of them with one hand. He couldn't set them on fire because he didn't want to hurt Ibara, but the girl tried to attack him with other vines, and this time some headbands were taken, fortunately all duplicates, and she also managed to destroy the gadgets left to Mei, who screamed desperately for the loss of her babies. Noting that Momo couldn't fight the other teams alone, Izuku tried to turn around to help her, but realized that the vines had blocked his arm and, despite not using all his strength, he couldn't break them to free himself. What the hell are these things? Not only he couldn't tear them apart, but their grip was getting stronger and stronger, and they didn't seem at all affected by the flames around his bones that, much to his surprise, were starting to crack due to the pressure. The boy turned to Ibara, who was glaring at him with her cold green eyes while her hair was ready to attack again. Time to pay for your sins, hissed Ibara before sending her vines toward Izuku just when Katsuki jumped toward him with Itsuka and Yosetsu. But just when they were about to grab some headbands, Present Mix's voice was heard in the air. Time's up, and the attackers fell to the ground as the vines of Ibara stopped a few inches from Izuku's face. Let's see who the top 4 teams are right now, shouted Present Mike before adding in first place, Team Uraraka. After returning to the ground, the team members cheered, but Achiko immediately emptied her stomach on the ground, with Aijiro patting her back while saying, "You have exceeded your limits like a real man." Thanks Achiko, while Hanta and Fumikage could only sweat drop at his words. In second place, Team Bakugo. Shit, we couldn't take their points, growled Bakugo, punching the ground. We're still in the top 4. And that's what matters, said Shota, looking for a moment at a certain man among the stadium stands with a cold glare. You did a good job with your quirk, Shiozaki, nodded Tenya, looking at the green-haired girl who merely gave them an emotionless look. Thank you, but don't expect me to join forces with sinners like you again. In third place, Team Midoriya. That went well, said Izuku, returning to his human form with the vehicle crumbling on itself. My babies. Momo looked at him, and then at Maya. Should we help her? I guess so, replied Izuku with a sweat drop before trying to calm their teammate. In fourth place, Team Shinso. Your tactic was useful, said Hitoshi with a grin. You're welcome, smiled Nito, looking around. At least 5 students from Class 1B managed to pass. 5? Cozy I looked around with confused eyes, but only the 3 of us plus Shiozaki managed to pass. Given that currently only 15 participants have passed, we need a 16th participant who will be chosen among the members of Team Kendo, shouted Midnight, looking at said team. So, who's gonna be our last finalist? You should go, Itsuka, cheered Setsuna with a toothy smile, surprising her friend. Are you sure? You were admitted through recommendation. You would have more chances to be noticed by the pros, said Itsuka. But Setsuna waved her off. Don't worry about that. And besides, you're the strongest among us. At her side, Reiko and Kinoko nodded at her. Itsuka smiled back at them. Thank you, all of you. Then it's decided. Itsuka Kendo joins the finalists. Midnight lashes the air with her whip. Soon after, Present Mike announced a lunch break for an hour, and all the participants started to head towards the canteen, chatting with each other. That was a really smart move, Uraraka, said Tenya to her friend. Thank you, but you were also cool during the battle, smiled Achiko before looking around. Did you see Midoriya by any chance? Now that you mention it, I don't see him anywhere, and Todoroki, Bakugo, and Shiozaki have also disappeared, noted Tenya, searching for his classmates and former teammate. Unbeknownst to them, Shoto had asked Izuku to follow him, and the 2 boys were now facing each other in an isolated corridor of the stadium. You wanted to talk, right? Asked Izuku, looking at the younger boy, who stared at him in silence for a few moments before speaking. As you probably know, Endeavor, the 2nd greatest hero of Japan, is my father. Izuku arched an eyebrow at that. Every time I see you using your quirk, I cannot help but think about him, and how much I hate that bastard. Izuku narrowed his eyes. So hates his own father. I can see now why he tried to avoid me at school, and why he's not using his left side. Yeah, he's gone all out to make a name for himself as a hero, but he's always seen All Might as a roadblock, and an eyesore. He could never beat All Might on his own, so he came up with another plan. Shoto looked Izuku right in the eyes. Quirk marriages, you've heard of them, right? They started becoming a problem during the second or third generation after quirks appeared. Strong individuals would choose a partner and force them into marriage for the sole purpose of passing on a strengthened version of their own quirk. Those earlier generations were lacking in ethics. Izuku didn't say anything, even though he already had a half-hearted idea of what Shoto was going to say. With his wealth and fame, my father made my mother's family agree to a marriage, all to get his hands on her quirk, raising me as a hero who could exceed All Might, just to fulfill his own ambitions. And I hate it, being no more than a tool for that human garbage. The air in the corridor began to get colder, and a layer of frost began to form on the wall behind Shoto. As I remember it, my mom was always crying. One day she said, "I can't stand to see that left side of yours," just before throwing scalding water in my face. This time even Izuku couldn't suppress a wince. In short, not using my left side is my revenge on him. Your quirk is similar to his, and All Might seems to have been interested in you. Therefore, defeating you without using my left side by rising to the top without using his quirk, I'll have denied him everything. A tense silence fell on the corridor, but after a few seconds, Shoto began to walk away. I don't know why All Might has an eye for you either way. I'll rise above you with just my right side. Sorry for wasting your time. You're really stupid, you know? Shoto stopped immediately, turning just to look at Izuku, who was glaring at him with a pissed-off look. I can understand perfectly why you hate your father. Anyone in your place would hate him, but the fact that you are only using half your power during such an important event. His right arm was already being devoured by his flames, which were slowly moving to his face. It really makes me angry. This is an incredible opportunity for all students of this school. All of them are striving to be noticed by the pros and to become heroes, while you are using only half your power so that you can deny your father any victory. From what I know of Endeavor, he is not well seen by the others, and for him all people are simple pebbles in the middle of the road, obstacles to be overcome or milestones to be added on his road to greatness, and you behave exactly like him. Shoto widened his eyes in shock while also clenching his fist. You want to be a hero, and reach the top only to be able to get revenge on him, using others to achieve your goal while using only half your power, when there are people out there who want to become heroes, but don't have a suitable quirk or abilities to be a hero. I for one do not deserve to be in this school after all I've done, but you're not worthy to wear that uniform when all you're thinking about is how to take revenge on your father. You want to fight me using only half my power? Very well, Son of Endeavor spat those words, as if they were poison. In that case, if we were to end up against each other, then I will not use all my power since I don't want to waste it on a simple tool like you. And after a brief blaze that evaporated the frost, Izuku returned to his human form before leaving, ignoring Katsuki, who was currently hidden behind a corner, intent on listening to their conversation. But unbeknown to him, Izuku already knew that he was there since the beginning. He continued to walk until he was in the innermost area of the stadium, and the corridor was deserted, except for a person standing a few feet away from him. Izuku recognized her immediately thanks to her vines-like hair. I was looking for you, Izuku Midoriya, said Ibra with an emotionless voice. I wonder why, Izuku replied, staring at her while feeling something like phantom pain in his left arm, where she had blocked him during the cavalry battle. I don't understand why you are here, but I know your soul is stained with sins, continued Ibra, ignoring his words, and it is my sacred mission to eradicate all sins and sinful people. Izuku slightly narrowed his eyes. Was she referring to the people he had killed? They were all guilty of something, but in the end they were dead. However, it was strange that she was aiming at him. Apparently his appearance didn't inspire much trust in people like her. Yet before he could reply, Ibra turned and left without saying a word. Izuku stared at her for a few seconds before heading for the cafeteria to get something to eat. After the lunch break, all the various participants returned to the center of the stadium, and Izuku, like everyone else, was surprised to see the girls in his class wearing cheerleader uniforms. And he had to admit that Momo wasn't bad at all dressed like that, even though he was unnerved by the fact that they had been deceived by Minoru and Denki. After a few comments to the audience, Present Mike shouted between the 16 finalists from the cavalry battle, "We'll have a formal tournament, a series of one-on-one battles." The students started talking to each other, wondering about some things, and the tournament itself until midnight came back to the stage. The matchups will be decided by drawing lots. Once that's settled, we'll move on to the festivities, and then the tournament itself. It's up to each of you 16 finalists whether or not you participate in the fun. I expect some of you would rather take a breather and save your strength. Nobody said anything, and one by one, the 16 finalists went to extract a number. And here are the matchups. Izuku and everyone else looked at the giant screens in the stadium. Tournament. Group A. Midoriya vs Shinso. Todoroki vs Monoma. Shiozaki vs Sero. Iida vs Hatsume. Group B. Kendo vs Kirishima. Yaoyorozu vs Tokoyami. Cavalry vs Uraraka, Bakugo vs Tsuburaba. That guy from the general studies thought Izuku was looking at Hitoshi, who was staring at the screen with a bored expression. I need to be careful. His quirk is unknown to me. At that moment, President Mike announced the start of recreational activities before the tournament, and Izuku took the opportunity to go to rest in an isolated place, being imitated by many others. Within an hour, the events ended, and the 16 finalists returned to the stadium where Cementos was using his quirk to create a huge concrete ring. Hey guys, are you ready? You've been through hell to get here, but now it's time for the one-on-one tournament. You've only got yourself to rely on. Even if you're not a hero, this saying holds true, and you know it, shouted President Mike while the ring was completed. Spirit, technique, strength, wisdom, and knowledge. Use them all, and show us your best. Near one of the two entrances to reach the ring, Izuku took a deep breath, waiting to be called for his fight, when All Might arrived behind him. Good luck with your fight, young Midoriya. Thanks, I'll do my best, nodded Izuku with a little smile. There are many pros in the audience interested in you. I'm sure you will not disappoint them, grinned All Might before patting me on the back. It's your time to shine. Izuku nodded again before walking toward the light just when President Mike was announcing the first match. It's the most feared skeleton in the world, the nightmare of all villains. It's Izuku Midoriya from the hero course. Izuku walked on the ring, staring ahead of him versus Hitoshi walked out, as well, looking at Izuku with his bored eyes. Sorry, but this guy hasn't really done anything to stand out yet. It's Hitoshi Shinso from the general studies. After a couple of seconds, President Mike started with the rules: win by knocking your opponent out of the ring, immobilizing them, or getting them to say I give up. Bring the pain. We've got our good old recovery girl on standby. And fight dirty if you must. Ethics have no meaning here. Of course, going for the kill is a no. You'll be disqualified. In that case, I'll stop you, said Cementos, waving at them with a smile. I give up, huh? Said Hitoshi, looking at Izuku. Get it, Midoriya? This battle is going to test your strength of will. Yeah? So what? Asked Izuku, staring at him. Now let's get this thing started. This is an important place for all those who want to become heroes. I still do not understand what someone like you is doing here, added Hitoshi with a glare, with Izuku glaring back at him. Ready? You are simply a killer, not a hero. Tell me, do you remember the faces of the people you killed? Start. Izuku clenched his fists while walking toward him. Of course I do, and dash. But he suddenly stopped in place, staring into space in front of him. It's my win, said Hitoshi with a cold voice while the audience stared in confusion at Izuku. Hey, what's wrong? Show us some spirit, shouted President Mike mere seconds into the match. Midoriya's frozen in place, looking confused. He's not even twitching. Could this be Shinso's quirk? All the audience continued to watch the ring in confusion, as President Mike argued with Shota next to him. But after a few seconds, Hitoshi spoke again. You're probably in this school to redeem yourself, but it doesn't matter now. Turn around and walk out of the ring. After a second of waiting, Izuku turned and started walking towards the exit without saying anything. Whoa, Midoriya's following orders like a good little boy. As President Mike kept talking, Izuku was constantly screaming in his mind while the edge of the ring was getting closer and closer. My body, it won't listen. I can't stop it. My head is so fuzzy. No, I can't. No. Huh. No. What is this voice? Where does it come from? No, I won't be tricked again. I won't be controlled again. I won't allow it. Much to everyone's surprise, a huge column of fire bursted out from Izuku's body, burning the ring beneath his feet for a few seconds, as a violent wave of hot air hit the spectators and Hitoshi, forcing them to cover their faces to protect themselves from the heat. After a few seconds, the heat diminished, and everyone could look back, and the first thing they saw was Izuku in its skeletal form, standing a few centimeters from the edge of the ring. Why did he stop? How is it possible that he can transform even when he is under my control? Thought Hitoshi with narrowed eyes. What are you waiting for? Get out of the ring! For a few seconds Izuku stood still, but then raised his flaming skull, and slowly turned to Hitoshi, who, despite his calm, couldn't hold back the shivers that ran down his back. He had already seen Izuku in that form, but he had never experienced anything like that. Something inside Hitoshi was screaming at him to get out of there. His instincts were telling him clearly that the one in front of him was not Izuku Midoriya. Not anymore. A surreal silence had fallen on the stadium when Izuku had suddenly transformed into his skeletal counterpart. Some of the spectators were whispering to each other, almost afraid of being heard by him, wondering what had happened, yet none of them had an answer. In the stands reserved for festival participants, the various students in Class 1A seemed to be in the same state of confusion. Hey, am I wrong or is something wrong? Asked Denki with a worried face. Midoriya seemed to be under Shinso's control, but as soon as he transformed he stopped, adding Hanta with a matching face. Not far from them, Achiko looked at the student beside her with uncertain eyes. Iida, Isn't this like? Yes, the bespectacled boy nodded with a drop of sweat running down his face. It's like that time he transformed when the alarm went off because of the media. Do you think he will do something risky? Asked the girl, feeling a strange anxiety pervading her chest. I really hope not, or it will end very badly for him, said Tenya, looking at the stadium with all the heroes gathered here. It would be crazy to do something compromising. Not knowing what else to say, the two could only hope that their friend would do nothing that he would later regret. Down in the arena, Hitoshi was still incredulous from what he had just seen. Izuku had managed to transform himself despite his mind control, and had even stopped before leaving the ring, going against his order. Hitoshi had never had a chance to train with his quirk, but he knew that, without outside help, it wasn't possible to escape the effects of his brainwashing. You were able to get rid of my control? He then asked, hoping to make his opponent talk again even if a part of his mind was still shouting at him to get out of there. Did you remember the people you killed? Is that what made you transform? However, despite those questions, Izuku didn't answer, and after a few seconds, he started walking slowly towards Hitoshi, leaving behind a trail of flaming footprints. The student from the general studies stepped back, suddenly intimidated by Izuku's presence. What is this? During the other events his presence wasn't so oppressive. Now he seems about to kill me at any moment, thought Hitoshi with a pale face, taking another step back. On either side of the arena, Midnight and Cementos watched Izuku with worried eyes, ready to intervene if necessary. The R-rated hero knew that her quirk wouldn't serve against him, being a skeleton without lungs, but she hoped that her colleague had the power to stop him, because otherwise they would have had quite a few problems. What's more, Aizawa told us that his quirk is ineffective against Izuku. I really hope the kid knows how to control himself, thought Midnight, gripping her whip, as the flaming skeleton was now in front of a terrified Hitoshi. Without saying anything, Izuku grabbed Hitoshi by his shirt, and lifted him into the air without any difficulty before looking him straight in the eye, now that there were only a few inches between them. Unconsciously, most of the audience held their breath when they saw him take that action, and not even present Mike dared to speak. Hitoshi could only stare into those empty eye sockets while his own soul seemed to be judged by something, but then he saw Izuku tilt his head slightly, and next thing he knew, he was flying against Midnight. The woman barely had time to open her arms before being thrown down along with the student due to the impact, which made them tumble several meters before stopping. And just like that, the tension that hung over the stadium vanished. Many of the heroes present sighed with relief, as the civilians began to talk to each other, much more relaxed now that Izuku had not tried to incinerate his opponent. The match has only lasted a few seconds, but those were among the most intense seconds of my life, shouted present Mike, with a much more serene voice. With only one move, Midoriya threw Shinso out of the ring, therefore the victory goes to the flaming skeleton. Outside the ring, Midnight raised a hand just to confirm what was just said by present Mike, then to make sure that Hitoshi was fine, and fortunately, he was just a little shaken. However, now that the various spectators had begun to speak again, only the two of them could hear those words that made them wince in fear. The next time you tried to control me. The two looked towards the ring, where Izuku was still in his flaming form. Your soul will burn in hell, be it pure or not. And with those words, the young boy returned to his human form, shaking his head while holding a hand against his forehead. What the hell, said Izuku, looking around. Midoriya, are you okay? Asked Midnight, standing between him and Hitoshi. Izuku looked at his teacher for a few moments before nodding, yet just a slight headache. Shinso's quirk must have reacted badly with mine. That's an understatement, thought the woman, raising an eyebrow. If you say so anyway, victory is yours, so get out of the ring, so we can go on with the matches. Izuku quickly bowed before leaving the ring, looking for a moment at Hitoshi, who looked back at him with frightened eyes. Shaking his head, Izuku returned to the corridor, and after a few steps, he found himself facing a familiar face. Young Midoriya, Toshinori said with a worried look. What happened out there? You were about to come out of the ring, as if you were hypnotized, and then you suddenly transformed. I feared for a moment that you were going to hurt young Shinso. Izuku sighed. I honestly don't know when I replied to him. It was like my body stopped responding, but it was a different feeling than when my quirk took control. He then looked at his own hand. When I was about to leave the ring, I heard a voice in my head. I never heard that voice, but it seemed angry, and whoever it was said it would never be tricked or controlled again. Toshinori scratched the back of his head. Well, this doesn't help us much. The only thing that comes to mind is that your quirk is somehow as sentient as young Tokoyami, but in a completely different way, even if the second part is the most confusing. Izuku could only shrug. There are 7 more matches before I have to go back out there. I will try to meditate or relax in some way. That's a wonderful idea. I advise you to go to Recovery Girl, in case you can ever give yourself a pill to calm your nerves. Perhaps all this is caused by stress, nodded Toshinori before walking away with the young boy. At the end of the corridor they met Shoto, but the son of Endeavor didn't stop even for a second, and continued to walk towards the arena. Watching him leave, Izuku could only shake his head. With that attitude, he risks making a mistake and losing. You may be right, but only for the last part, Toshinori said, catching Izuku's attention. I am also a teacher for the Class 1B, and I can tell you that many of those young students could give young Todoroki and young Bakugo a hard time. Even his opponent, Monoma? The blonde hero could only nod, especially young Monoma. Alright, after a short but intensive first match, it's time to move forward. Therefore give a warm welcome to Shoto Todoroki, the Ice Prince from Class 1A, shouted Present Mike, with the crowd that cheered, as soon as Shoto came out into the sunlight, walking in the ring with a calm face. And his opponent, the mastermind from Class 1B, Nito Monoma. The blonde student approached his adversary, greeting the crowd with a serene smile on his lips, before stopping a few meters from Shoto. After looking around for a moment, Nito asked, I guess a big shot like you is above frivolous things like a handshake before the match, right? When Shoto remained silent without giving him an answer, the blonde chuckled, so you consider yourself so superior that you think it is useless to answer me? Class 1A's arrogance knows no boundaries. Start. Guess I'll be the one to take you down a peg or two, grinned Nito before being completely blocked by ice up to his neck, shocking the entire stadium. Holy dash, Todoroki hasn't wasted a second, and has already blocked Monoma, shouted Present Mike with shocked eyes, looking at the iceberg created by the Son of Endeavor. Is it possible that this match will also be over in a single instant? Midnight stared at the enormous mass of ice before shaking her head, and moving her eyes to Nito who, despite everything, was still smiling. Monoma, can you move? He looked up for a moment with thoughtful eyes before smirking yes. At that moment, his arms and legs began to rotate like drills, destroying his ice coffin, much to Shoto's surprise. Nito wasted no time, and dashed toward him with his arms already rotating before trying to hit his opponent, but Shoto managed to create a wall of ice. His defense was however destroyed by a fist of Nito, who then tried again to hit the Son of Endeavor, this time with a kick. However, Shoto created a column of ice from under his feet. As with the wall of ice, Nito managed to destroy the ice construct without difficulty, but when Shoto found himself in midair, he moved his right arm, creating several spikes of ice with which he tried to hit the Class 1B student. Nito jumped to the side, avoiding all the blows, and then remaining in a crouch while Shoto landed a few meters from him, but this time he did not try to attack his opponent with a wave of ice, merely observing him. What? Have you already understood that your ice is useless against my quirk? Grinned Nito without moving. You're pretty smart, but not enough. Before Shoto could understand what he was referring to, something hit him at the base of the neck. The blow was not too strong, but it was more than enough to temporarily stun him, and make him stagger forward. Despite his confusion, Shoto managed to stay on his feet, and hear Nito's amused words. I guess this is the difference between me and Kendo. One of her chops would have at least made you fall to your knees. Shaking his head to recover, Shoto was able to bring his gaze back to Nito, just in time to see his left hand reattaching to the rest of his body. He can also detach parts of his body and control them from a distance, so he has two quirks. Narrowing his eyes, Shoto tried to think about a strategy to fight him, but Nito started to laugh, catching his attention. Why are you laughing? It's nothing, really, said Nito, raising his hands in defense. I was just thinking that with a quirk like yours you should have already won. Here, let me show you how to use your power. And under the shocked eyes of Shoto and the whole stadium, Nito's left arm was suddenly enveloped in flames as a layer of ice began to expand from beneath his right foot. It's time to warm up the situation, but please don't lose your cool, said Nito with a sinister light in his eyes. What the hell? He also has his quirk? Shouted Eijiro, looking at the match with incredulous eyes, just like everyone else in his class. How's that possible? He's a fucking copycat, growled Katsuki with narrowed eyes, confusing his classmates. A copycat? Repeated Hanta, tilting his head to the side. During the last event I saw the guy with him use that drill-like quirk, while the girl in team with giant hands had detached parts of her body with complete freedom. Sitting not far away, Itsuka shot him a dirty look due to the nickname. That fucker simply copied their quirks, so he can copy quirks? Man, that's so unfair, complained Denki with a sigh. That's way too strong. No, it's not, you fucking Pikachu, thought Katsuki while still looking at the match. He must have limits with a quirk like that. For example, he can't use two quirks at the same time. Otherwise he would have used the first two together to hit half and half in the back. Wait, does it mean that Todoroki will use his flames? It would be the first time, noted Rikito with the others nodding at his words. He won't use them, thought Izuku, narrowing his eyes. He'll try to win, while using only his ice. A huge wave of flames crashed against Shoto, but the Son of Endeavor created a large amount of ice to counter the fire. However, he was then forced to throw himself aside to avoid the flames that were about to overwhelm his attack. Without waiting, he created another wave of ice aiming at Nito, who countered it with an identical move, causing an explosion of ice fragments. Fighting only with your ice will make you lose, but you know that already. Your body is already experiencing the first effects of hypothermia. mocked Nito, firing a stream of fire from his left hand. I know it well, since I'm using the same power. Slamming his foot firmly on the ground, he created a wave of ice more powerful than the previous one that managed to prevail against that of Shoto, forcing him to jump again to the side. I wonder if yours is just arrogance, or even ignorance. Another stream of fire. Your father is the famous endeavor, yet you're not even using his flames. Afraid to disappoint him? Shoto's eyes widened as he gritted his teeth. Disappoint him? Disappoint him? That was the picture that his opponent had imagined? That he was afraid to disappoint that bastard of his father? Remaining still with his head tilted forward, Shoto started to create ice around his right foot, while Nito pointed his left hand at him. Well, if this is your brilliant strategy to win, I'd say I'm pretty disappointed. And with those words, he fired a flood of flames at Shoto, who, however, did not try to avoid the attack. He simply let himself be enveloped by the fire, shocking his opponent and all the spectators. What has he decided to give up? Thought Nito before stopping the stream of flames. Looking at the wall of steam created by his attack, luckily the air wasn't too cold, otherwise I would have risked destroying everything. With his usual smile, he turned to tell Midnight to call the end of the match. But a sudden tremor caught his attention, and, from the steam, Shoto popped up, dashing towards him thanks to a flow of ice created by his right leg. Before Nito could defend himself with any quirk, his opponent managed to grab his face with the right hand, and only then did the blonde realize that Shoto's body was no longer covered with frost. He has cancelled the effects of hypothermia? How dash! Ah, how ironic. Nito tried to use his flames, but his face was already wrapped in ice, bringing him to a state of near fainting. I wanted to defeat him with his quirk, and instead I helped him win. In the next instant, his entire body was locked up in an ice coffin. A surreal silence reigned in the stadium before Midnight, after a careful look at both competitors, raised her whip, and Monoma was no longer able to fight. The winner is Todoroki. With those words, the spell broke, and the whole stadium burst into a chorus of applause, screams, and whistles, as Shoto used his left hand to melt the ice around Nito. The blonde student then fell to his knees trying to catch his breath. That was really risky, you know? Sorry about that, said Todoroki without appearing really sorry before turning on his heels. Seeing that quirk made me very angry. Without waiting for a reply, he simply walked away, shooting a cold look at a man in particular in the crowd. Man, that was intense, said Denki with sweat running down his face. But I didn't understand how Todoroki managed to survive in the end. The fire should have roasted him. He used fire to help himself, explained Momo with a hand on her chin. From what I've seen, Todoroki can't use his ice freely because his body's temperature probably goes down too much if he abuses that power. That's why when Monoma attacked with his flames, Todoroki used them to raise his body temperature. What? That's super dangerous, shouted Mina with shocked eyes, mimicked by many others except two. That was so Tetsu, and Aijiro raised their fists at the same time with tears in their eyes, so manly. I hope he doesn't decide to do the same against Midoriya, as that would be far more risky. Ribbit. Strangely, no one could object to Tsia's words. We are only on the third match, and we have already assisted to something incredible. This year's tournament is full of surprises. The voice of President Mike echoed in the whole stadium, but, as I said, it's time for the third couple of fighters. The crowd cheered as the first student made his entrance in the arena. This guy's somehow still as plain as they come despite being in the cream of the crop. From Class 1A, Hanta Sero. Ouch, he really had to introduce me like this. And besides, Ojiro is more plain than me, thought Hanta with a sigh while his opponent walked toward him. Versus Class 1B's assassin, the Queen of Thorns, Ibara Shiozaki. Seeing her expression completely concentrated, Hanta prepared for a relentless assault, but at the last second, she turned to present Mike. Pardon my objection, but what exactly did you mean by assassin? I have merely come this far seeking victory in the name of God. Sorry about that. Class B's got all the types, huh? Wondered Hanta, looking at the girl who was still talking, now to everyone, about her duty, and where did the divine light come from. But then, President Mike announced the beginning of the match. Oh man, I'm not a bad guy. And I don't want to immobilize her with my tape, not after what happened with Hagakure. He still suffered from phantom pains since that day, but I really want to win. Without waiting for Ibara to turn, Hanta fired 2 strips of tape from his elbows, wrapping his opponent's chest and ankles before rotating on his axis to drag her out of the ring using the strength of his tape. His plan failed a second after its implementation, when he realized that he couldn't move Ibara, not even by a millimeter. Looking in her direction with confused eyes, he was shocked to see that her vines-like hair had lengthened and had sunk into the ring, holding her in place. Slowly she turned her head towards him, and Hanta felt a shiver run down his spine. Attacking a girl from behind while she is spreading the word of God, her blue eyes went cold, as if such a sinful person doesn't deserve to advance in this tournament. Before Hanta could tear off his tape and try to attack her again, Ibara's vines stretched further, tearing through the 2 strips of tape before immobilizing her opponent, raising him in the air. as if crucified. Seeing this show of strength, Midnight whistled I thank you, and Kamui Woods are almost on the same level. Sero, can you move? Are you kidding, right? Deadpanned Hanta before wincing ow. These thorns are painful, and even this match is over in an instant. The winner is Shiozaki, shouted present Mike while said girl lowered Hanta on the ground before freeing him. Without bothering to look at him, she left the ring in the rain of applause from the crowd. She is really strong, noted Kyoka with a raised eyebrow. Her quirk is incredibly versatile. Of course she's strong, shouted Tetsu, catching Class 1A's attention. She came fourth in the entrance exam. Her quirk is not a joke at all. You came 8th, yet you are not even in the tournament. Setsuna sniped with a grin, making him on the ground. Come on, you're still cool. The next match is between Iida and that girl of the support course. Aijiro looked at the others. Who do you believe will win? Well, Iida is very strong, but from what I understand that girl can use the gadgets she created, so she might even have a few tricks up her sleeve, replied Denki with a shrug. Achiko pointed at the ring with a smile. We'll find out soon. They're about to start. And now the last match of the first block. The first participant is the only student of the support course which has been able to qualify for the tournament. Mei Hatsume. President Mike pointed at said girl, as she walked with a smile on her face, and several gadgets visible on her, before shifting his gaze to the other side of the arena. And her opponent is one of the fastest students of the whole school, Tenya Iida from Class 1A. Tenya walked with a firm and determined gaze, but everyone immediately realized how he too had several gadgets visible on his body. Midnight pointed at him with her whip. Aren't those forbidden for the hero course students? You have to put in a special request for those things beforehand. I'm terribly sorry, I had forgotten this rule. Tenya bowed in her direction, but since my opponent offered her gadgets voluntarily out of pure sportsmanship, I wasn't able to say no. Well, that's good enough for me. If both parties are fine with it, I think we can allow this, right? Said Shota while sitting at present Mix right. Well, in that case, you're free to use them, nodded Midnight, and so the match finally began. Tenya didn't hesitate for a moment, and ran to Mei so that he could finish the match quickly, but she simply smiled. You're really fast, Iida. A microphone? Wondered Tenya, as she talked about the gadgets around his legs, which were made to make his muscles work less, thus allowing him to conserve his energies. When he was only a few meters away from her, however, Mei jumped high thanks to her special boots that allowed her to hover in the air thanks to a combination of fans and magnetic energy. Fighting against fast people like you is really a problem, but for all problems there is a solution, the girl told him, while glancing at some men in business suits among the crowd. One possible solution is this. When Tenya tried again to grab her, a violent flash generated from the device mounted on her chest that blinded him momentarily, allowing Mei to jump away from him. Spinning on herself, she tossed a metal sphere at his feet and, after a short beep, the sphere released a greenish liquid onto the ground that looked like mud, but as soon as Tenya tried to move, he found himself stuck on the ground. What the dash? Quick enemies can be easily slowed down or stopped. For example, with my slime sphere. Mei looked at the crowd, as if she was trying to sell them her gadgets. And in fact it was just what she was doing. Guh, I'll never be stopped by something like this, shouted Tenya before bursting out of that trap with the pure power of his quirk, surprising for a moment Mei. She jumped up again, this time taking advantage of 2 retractable iron rods mounted on her waist before firing a grappling hook on the ground, and landing quickly. Obviously there are people fast, but also strong, able to get rid of such a trap. In that case there are other ways to stop them. She quickly threw a strange white device against Tenya, who avoided it without difficulty, but when he approached his opponent to push her out of the ring, he saw Mei with a smile on her face, and a detonator in her hand. Admire my automatic speed revealing lasso. As soon as she pressed the button, Tenya found himself with a metal wire around his ankles that made him fall, making his face slam against the ring. Damn you, and if by chance you wanted to make your opponent get closer or away from you, all you have to do is do it, said Mei without losing her smile before pressing another button, and soon after, Tenya was dragged away from her, toward the device. It lasted a few seconds, but he hated each of those seconds, until he stopped, and felt the cable loosen until he was completely free. Good, now dash. Iida is out of the ring. Hatsume moves on to the second round, announced Midnight, raising her whip with a sympathetic look on her face. Tenya stared at her with shocked eyes before looking down, noting at that moment that the device launched by Mei had dragged him out of the ring, albeit a few inches. Phew, that was some good stuff, said Mei, wiping off the sweat from her forehead. In the next match you will see something even more special. You deceived me, screamed Tenya, pointing at her. Sorry for using you like that, mumbled Mei, looking away with a half smile, although you could almost hear the laughter in her voice. I really dislike you. That was strange. She managed to beat him while explaining her gadgets to the crowd. She said Mizo through one of his mouths. I wonder if she will have something suitable against Shiozaki. No way, Shiozaki won't lose against a bunch of toys, said Kozai with a grin, being supported by some of his class, while said girl simply looked at the ring with calm eyes, just like our big sis won't lose against your wannabe Tetsu. Big sis? Repeated Momo, looking at them with confused eyes. Yes, Kendo is class 1B's big sis. She's among the strongest in our class, and she can easily kick Tetsu's ass, nodded Setsuna with a grin, while the said boy fell on his knees with tears streaming down his face. Come on, you're still cool, for real. You think Kirishima will win? Asked Denki, looking at his classmates. He'll fucking lose, growled Katsuki without looking at him. All the others sweat dropped, talking about faith in your friends. It's time to start with Block B. The first to make his entry is one of the most resistant students of all the hero course. From Class 1A, Eijiro Kirishima. President Mike waited a moment to allow the fans to applaud the redhead boy, before adding, and his opponent is Class 1B Aespa's sister, currently considered as one of the most strongest students in hand-to-hand combat. She's Atsuka Kendo. The girl stopped a few meters from Eijiro with a determined look on her face, while her opponent immediately assumed a fighting pose. I'm sorry that your opponent must be me, said Atsuka with a little smile. You were unlucky. How so? Asked Eijiro with a raised eyebrow, as President Mike shouted start. Without wasting a second, she dashed toward him with both arms on her right side, and the hands hidden from him. Because I fought against Tetsu at least 30 times in the last few days. Her quirk allows her to enlarge her hands. I must harden and absorb the blow, and then counterattack, thought the redhead, crossing his arms in front of his face while using his quirk on his whole body, thus missing the grin from Atsuka. The same mistake, shouted Atsuka before bringing her arms onward with one hand pointing upward and the other downward, with both palms facing Eijiro Hadaken. What? Eijiro raised his head with incredulous eyes, just in time to see Atsuka's hands becoming enormous upon touching his arms, thus creating a strong shockwave that knocked him backwards, making him bounce off the ground until he fell out of the ring. Kirishima is out of the ring. Kendo moves on to the second round. While the crowd celebrated the victory of the young martial artist, Eijiro got back on his feet. That wasn't a Hadaken. Itsuka merely chuckled. I know, but I'm a fan of that game, and the movements of my hands were the same. My quirk covered the lack of an energy sphere. To use such a legendary move even if it isn't complete, the redhead student looked at her with teary eyes. That's so manly. His opponent's sweat dropped at his words. While he's really like Tetsu. He lost instantly, whined Denki with a sigh. I was hoping that he could last at least a minute. Don't worry, Tetsu too has suffered the same fate against her, laughed Setsuna, with the others nodding except said metal boy, and he continues to suffer it even after seeing the same move dozens of times. Predictably, Tetsu fell to the ground with a dark aura around him. I have the impression that she is having a lot of fun, whispered Denki to Hanta, who could only nod at his words, while the others looked at Setsuna as she tried to cheer Tetsu up, without too much effort. Her time having arrived, Momo took a deep breath and headed for the arena entrance after greeting her classmates, but after a few steps, she saw Izuku walking towards her after returning from the bathroom. It's your turn? Yes, I'm against Tokoyami, but I've already thought of at least a dozen strategies to use against him, said Momo with a serious face. Izuku arched an eyebrow. Really? Just to fight a shadow? She looked at him with confused eyes. What do you mean? That's simple. You actually thought about several strategies just to fight a shadow, explained Izuku with a chuckle before patting her on the shoulder. If you want advice, the simplest solutions are also the best. And with that, he went to sit with the others while Momo stood there and thought of his words. She repeated that word before understanding the meaning of Izuku's words. With a smile on her face, she walked toward the arena. I was really thinking too much about this match. It's time for another match. For the first time in this tournament, two students of the same class will face each other. The first to make her entry is one of the most brilliant students. From Class 1A, Momo Yayorozu. After another deep breath, Momo came out into the sunlight, walking with her head held high until she stopped in the middle of the ring, waiting for her opponent. On the other side of the ring, one of the darkest students. From the same class, he's Fumikage Tokoyami. Without delay, her classmate joined her in the ring, and the two stared intently for several seconds until she said, I won't go easy on you. I don't expect anything less, nodded Fumikage with Dark Shadow coming out of his back. Start. Dark Shadow moved quickly to hit Momo before she could create anything, but, due to recent training with their quirks, she was much faster and, when the shadow entity was close to hitting her, it saw that she had already created a pair of glasses that were connected to ear protection. Something bounced on the ground, and both Fumikage and Dark Shadow looked at that object, only to widen their eyes in shock when they saw that it was a grenade, but not just any grenade. A flashbang. The sudden explosion of light and sound blinded much of the stadium, and forced Dark Shadow to retreat while Fumikage put his hands over his eyes, screaming in pain. Without hesitation, Momo threw two more grenades, as she created a truncheon from one hand. Running to the maximum of her speed, she quickly cleared the distance between them and, with an enviable precision, struck her opponent on the right temple, causing him to stagger, before spinning on herself, and hitting him from below, making him fall to the ground back first. She put one foot on his left wrist, resting the tip of the truncheon under his beak, while in the left hand she created another grenade surrender, or I'll create more flashbangs, and I know that you can't stand too strong light. Using the weakness of dark shadows so brutally, a really dark tactic, coughed Fumikage, before nodding, I give up. Having heard him, Midnight raised a hand decreeing Momo the winner of the meeting, while said girl helped him get up. Are you okay? Yes, thank you. Even if I lost, I have to admit, that tactic was really good. She smiled at him. Thanks, even though it wasn't my idea. Someone gave me a simple tip. Fumikage merely shrugged. A victory is a victory. Next match you're up against that girl from Class 1B. She fights differently than I do. I know, but nothing will stop me from winning. And after waving at the crowd, they both walked away, leaving the ring available for the following match. As soon as they entered the tunnel, they saw Achiko running towards them with a wide smile. That was awesome. I didn't know you could even make explosives that fast, Yayorozu. I have to thank Aizawa-sensei's training if I can now create things so quickly. If it hadn't been for him, I probably would have lost in a few seconds against Tokoyami and his dark shadow, explained Momo while pointing at their classmate. Still, you were amazing. You're against that student from Class 1B, right? Asked Fumikage, looking at her, the one with the drill-like quirk. She nodded. Yes, if that's his quirk, then he'll have to get close to me. But if I can touch him even once, I can win. It's time for our 7th match of the first round. The first to enter the ring is my personal pick. From Class 1A, Ochako Uraraka. That's me. I'll see you later. Achiko waved at them before walking outside, receiving many applauses and shouts of encouragement from the crowd, especially thanks to her victory in the previous event. Now, her opponent. His drill is the drill that will pierce the heavens. From Class 1B, Sin Kaibara. Sin stopped a few steps away from her, keeping a calm expression on his face. However, when President Mike shouted at the beginning of the meeting, he didn't hesitate a moment before running toward her with his right hand ready to strike. Here he comes. Need to dodge to the right, and then touch him. Sin tried to hit her with a wide right hook, but that punch was too telegraphed, and even Achiko managed to avoid his attack easily by lowering herself at the right moment. However, she was surprised when she felt his left fist lean against her right side. Not being a real attack, Sin hadn't needed to put too much force behind it, and had simply moved his arm when she had dodged his right fist. Before Achiko could react and grab him, she felt his hand push deeper into her side. The next instant, an unimaginable pain pervaded her body, making her open her mouth in shock. But no sound came out, letting a voiceless scream be visible on her aching face. Only a few drops of blood fell to the ground, but it seemed to her that Sin had just ripped off a whole piece of flesh from her body. Taking advantage of her disorientation, Sin spun around before hitting her with a drill kick in the chest, hurling her several meters away. Achiko coughed blood mixed with saliva, and tried to get up, but Sin was immediately on her, and started hitting her with a series of punches, making her back away more and more. On the sidelines, Midnight watched the fight with a hand on her chin. That first punch was just a fake. His real purpose was to be able to hit her with the second. If I saw correctly, it is a variant of the fist clench used by some boxers. Instead of immediately using his quirk, Kaibara made sure he was in contact with Uraraka first, so as to maximize the damage, and from that young girl's expression, he did a lot of harm. Back in the ring, Achiko tried again to touch her opponent using both hands, but Sin avoided her without any effort, hitting her back in the chest. Gritting her teeth, the girl charged with her head down, aiming at his legs, but Sin jumped up before hitting her in the back with a kick. Sorry, but in this kind of fights I'm one of the best in my class, said Sin, as she tried again to touch him before delivering a drill uppercut to her chin, followed by a knee to the chest. Achiko leaned forward, coughing more with the hands on her aching chest, barely able to stand. Taking his right arm back, Sin prepared his fist, which was already spinning like a drill. Time to end this. He aimed to her head to knock her unconscious, but, much to Sin's surprise, with a fluid movement, Achiko managed to take off her shirt and throw it on his fist, wrapping it in the fabric. I blocked him. Now I can win. And despite the pain she was feeling, Achiko lunged forward with outstretched arms, trying to touch him at least once. However, with her attention focused on trying to use her quirk on him, Achiko couldn't see Sen's right fist, still wrapped in her shirt, before he struck her on the left temple with enough force to make her fall to the ground. That blow, combined with the impact on the concrete of the ring, was the decisive move to make her lose consciousness, thus guaranteeing victory to her opponent. Midnight looked at Ochako for a moment before nodding. Uraraka was unable to continue. Kaibara moves on to the second round. The crowd applauded the boy's victory, and his opponent's willpower, though some among them seemed more inclined to yell at him that he could go lighter with her. Ignoring those people, Sin left the ring while two robots carried Ochako away on a stretcher, heading for the infirmary. Damn, she almost got him, said Kyoka, feeling sorry for her classmate. That Kaibara is good, very good in melee combat, added Mashireo with a frown. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, Uraraka doesn't seem very accustomed to it. It's a pity, just one touch would have been enough. Ribbit. This only serves to prove that our class is not inferior to yours, said Nito with a laugh, conveniently ignoring the fact that, up until that point, he was the only member of Class 1B to have lost. Well, that won't matter now, said Ijiro, raising a fist. How can you be so sure? Asked Tetsu with a raised eyebrow, who was joined by the other when he saw half of the other class pointing at the huge screen in the stadium. Genki merely grinned because your classmate is against him. For the last matchup of the first round, a celebrity since his middle school days, with a face only a mother could love. From Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki made his entrance into the ring with his usual face, although it almost seemed that he was more pissed off than usual. And it didn't go unnoticed by his adversary, who could only swallow with a worried face while President Mike announced his entry. Versus the one who always aims to the top, and will do everything to succeed. From Class 1B, Kozuite Subiraba. Katsuki stared at his opponent without blinking, slowly opening and closing his right hand with the other hidden in his pants pocket, as Kozuite took deep breaths, keeping an eye on the other student. When President Mike announced the start of the fight, Katsuki aimed behind him and created a powerful explosion to launch himself towards Kozuite, who blew forward, creating a sort of transparent shield. Without hesitating, Katsuki hit that shield with his right fist, but all he got were only cracks in the barrier created by Kozuite, who grinned until a few days ago such a punch would have destroyed my solid air, but with Vlad Sensei's training it's much more resistant. Taking another deep breath, he made a short burst of speed to get around his own barrier, and blew toward Katsuki. The air coming out of his mouth took the form of a punch directed at Katsuki's face, but the blonde simply tilted his head to the side, avoiding the attack, before raising his right hand, now dangerously close to Kozuite's face. Oh shit! Boom! Many spectators who sat in the stands were startled because of the explosion, while others could only watch with pity the body of Kozuite, as it bounced several times in the ring, before stopping a few meters from Cementas, who stared at the student for a few seconds before shifting his eyes on Midnight, and shake his head. Subiraba is unable to continue. Bakugo moves on to the second round. What a fucking joke, growled Katsuki, walking away. I ended up fighting the weakest of these extras. Only then did many realize that, all the time, Katsuki had never used his left hand. Apparently he hasn't lost his touch, thought Izuku before standing up, and headed to one of the rooms near the entrance to get ready for his second match. Ever since he had talked to All Might, Izuku had somehow tried to summon the voice he had heard during his fight with Hitoshi, yet his attempts hadn't yielded any results. He walked calmly, knowing that there would be a few minutes of pause before the start of the second round of the matches, but when he was alone in a corridor, his sixth sense warned him of someone around the corner, and, when he saw who it was, Izuku wasn't surprised to see Endeavor. There you are, said the flaming hero, staring at him with a frown. Endeavor, why are you here? I know very well what you are capable of, Flaming Centaur. I have been tempted several times to hunt you down to measure my flames against yours, said Endeavor, crossing his arms over the chest. Is he trying to flatter me somehow? Thought Izuku with a raised eyebrow. Endeavor didn't seem to notice the change, however. My son has the duty of surpassing All Might. His match against you will prove a valuable test. He pointed at Izuku with cold eyes, so give it your all. Put up a good fight against him. Now that was what Izuku really hated about this man. He could perceive different sins inside him, but, surprisingly, not so many as to cause a violent reaction. Ignoring Endeavor's last words, as he left, Izuku took a deep breath as he approached the entrance to the arena while the clamor of the crowd could be heard in the air. A valuable test, huh? Izuku stood there for a moment with a frown. Oh, it will certainly be a test, but not the kind of test you expect, Endeavor. After a few minutes, a small robot beckoned him out, and Izuku nodded, going out into the arena at the same time as Shoto. While President Mike announced their entry, both of these competitors have won top marks in this festival so far, but there's only room for one true victor. Midoriya versus Todoroki. You ready? Asked Shoto, glaring at Izuku, who merely rolled his shoulders. Definitely more ready than you. Start. President Mix's screen was not even finished that Shoto created a violent ice wave aiming at Izuku, who simply jumped to the side, avoiding all the spikes. Endeavor's son tried again to hit him with that tactic, but Izuku jumped again, landing on the ice created by the previous attack, and was pleased to see Shoto's annoyed look. Or is annoyed that I continue to dodge, or it could be that he cannot create ice on existing ice, wondered Izuku. But his second hypothesis was practically wiped out by Shoto when he created more ice, with much more power, destroying all the ice he had created before. Izuku avoided that attack again, yet his left arm remained stuck in the ice, but it lasted only a few moments because he managed to melt it without even looking at it. Shoto narrowed his eyes. Are you just planning to dodge all the time? Are you just going to use your mother-esque quirk? Replied Izuku, stressing out those two words. If your answer is yes, then please surrender. You can't beat me with her ice. You'll regret those words, hissed Shoto before firing another wave of ice. But Izuku avoided with ease before running toward him. Seeing this, the son of Endeavor waited until the last second before creating a wall of ice in front of him. Come to think, I never tried to fight without using my powers. I wonder what my current limits are, thought Izuku before punching the wall. Barely able to crack it. I can say I am physically strong, but his ice is very hard. I guess I'll have to get around it. A grin crossed his face. Or I could just melt it. And that was exactly what he did, but as soon as the ice began to melt, a new wave completely destroyed it, even managing to hit Izuku, who was thrown several meters away. Rising immediately to his feet, Izuku rubbed his neck, watching his opponent. Right, it's not just his quirk that is strong. If he had been against someone else, he would have already won. He has good judgment, excellent control over his ice, and also excellent mobility. Most likely he is already stronger than several pro heroes. He sighed. Even though I know I'm stronger than him, right now he could beat me if I don't pay attention, and I won't transform until he decides to use his flames. Without waiting any longer, he ran back to Shoto, who created another wall of ice. But this time Izuku stuck his fingers into the cold surface after partially melting it, and used it to push himself upward, just when his opponent went for the same tactic, destroying the wall with more ice. Rotating in midair, Izuku managed to hit Shoto with a punch in the head, making him stagger, but Endeavor's son created more ice to defend himself and attack Izuku at the same time. Thinking quickly, Izuku brought both hands to the left, and used the little control he had on his flames in that form to create two small explosions of fire that helped him avoid the attack. Rolling to the ground, he then turned to try to hit Shoto again, but was forced to throw himself aside to avoid another wave of ice. But he noticed that the attack was much slower than the previous ones. So he's already reaching the limit. Izuku looked at Shoto, and noticed some frost stains on his right arm and leg. He won't last much longer like this. Deciding to keep him using the ice as much as possible, Izuku started to run around his opponent, trying to find a breach in his defenses, occasionally melting some spikes of ice and avoiding Shoto's attacks, which were now much slower. Can't you do this? You're weak now, son of Endeavor, said Izuku, looking at Shoto, who narrowed his eyes. But since you won't use your father's quirk, then go on and try to win with your mother's size. You're annoying, growled Shoto before releasing more ice. And this Izuku didn't move. However, the ice merely covered him up to the chest, but Izuku was already melting it without any difficulty. And you're an idiot, Izuku told him with a frown before running toward him. The son of Endeavor created another wall of ice with several spikes on it, but Izuku didn't care. This time he put more strength into his fist and his melting ability, managing to break through that wall and grab Shoto's shirt before pulling him against his own wall, destroying it with ease and throwing him on the ground. What you're using now is not your mother's quirk, hissed Izuku before punching him again. The quirks are inherited from generation to generation and often undergo further mutations. Your quirk is not just ice, as it is not just fire. It's something different. He kicked him in the midsection, making Shoto roll on the ground while coughing saliva. Why do you even care about my quirk? Yelled Shoto, creating more ice, with his right arm almost completely covered in frost. Izuku melted it without even trying, and grabbed Shoto by the shirt with both hands. I don't care about you, quirk. I'm just pissed that someone like you, who spits on the hard work of others, has been admitted to this school. He threw Shoto on the ground before trying to stomp his chest, but Shoto rolled away, creating several ice spikes. When he tried to get up, however, he noticed that even his leg was now almost completely covered with frost. Why are you even here? Growled Izuku, punching him in the face before Shoto could defend himself. Why the hell did you want to enroll in this school? You want to be a hero, right? Shoto widened his eyes in shock, as those words he thought he had forgotten echoed in his mind. Your power is not a copy of Endeavor's quirk. Izuku punched Shoto in the gut before headbutting him. He didn't even know why he was doing all this, for someone as stupid as Shoto. However, the thought that that boy was only using half his power to get revenge on his father pissed him off more than it should. It was so fucking stupid. That's fine. You're not bound by his blood. Shoto staggered back before he was hit by another punch that knocked him to the ground. That's your own power, your own quirk. It's okay for you to become. Slowly, Shoto stood up with steam coming out from the left side of his body. Who you want to be? And then the steam turned to flames. A massive column of flames surprised the entire stadium, as the air suddenly became hotter. Even Izuku was surprised by the sheer power of that fire, although his surprise soon turned to excitement. In the midst of that sea of flames came the voice of Shoto. I am here. The flames dissipated slightly, allowing Izuku to see his opponent with the left side pervaded by the fire while the right one was now free of frost. Because I want to be a hero too, A smile formed on Shoto's face, who had tears at the edge of his eyes, but Izuku didn't pay any attention to that, feeling happy to be able to see all the power of his opponent. In the bewildered silence of the stadium, a voice thundered in the air. Everyone, except Izuku and Shoto, turned to Endeavor, who was coming down a few steps with a wide grin on his face. So you've finally accepted it. Excellent. With my blood pumping through your veins, you will surpass me, and you'll fulfill my ambitions. A sudden pep talk from Mr. Endeavor? Wondered aloud present Mike, looking at the pro hero. What a doting parent. However, the two adversaries in the center of the ring ignored all this, continuing to stare at each other until a grin appeared on Izuku's face. So these are your flames, huh? I can almost feel the heat. What are you grinning at? Asked Shoto, catching his attention. If you don't decide to use your power, then it's not my problem what happens to you now. And to emphasize his words, he slammed his right foot to the ground, creating several spikes of ice around him, as his flames seemed to grow in intensity. Maybe you're right. Izuku's grin widened, as new flames began to consume his body. If so, show me your quirk, son of No. The flames reached his face, burning his flesh. Show me your true power, Shoto Todoroki. As the two students accumulated more and more power, with the clear intention of colliding again, Cementas slammed his hands hard against the concrete in front of him. Midnight. If these two were to clash now, we may no longer have an arena at the end, concluded the woman, ripping off part of her costume to let her quirk in the air. But, at that precise moment, Shoto created a mountain of ice with so much power to destroy the ring. As the ice progressed, Izuku noticed this detail, and jumped with all his strength to reach his opponent. So you want to end the fight with this attack? Fine by me. Come at me with everything you've got. Shoto moved his left arm in a wide arc, instantly melting all the ice around him, and then slowly raising it, his palm now white because of the intensity of his flames. Midoriya. At the same time, Izuku's right arm was covered by his flames that began to swirl around it. Hell! As the two opponents got closer and closer, the temperature around them soared, and finally they both spread their arms forward. Thank you. Smash! At the last possible second, before the two could clash directly, a thick concrete wall rose from the ground. Their attacks, however, were so powerful that they instantly disintegrated it, and generated a violent explosion that shook the entire stadium, causing many of the spectators to fall to the ground, as well as Midnight, who was thrown against the wall. The incessant shock wave died after a few seconds, leaving room for a huge column of smoke and steam that was visible even from outside the stadium, as could be confirmed by the heroes called upon to implement the safety measures. A surreal silence fell over the stadium, as everyone stared in shock at the enormous cloud of smoke caused by the explosion, while many of them wondered how two students could control so much power. What the dash? What's wrong with your class? Said Present Mike, currently on the ground. At his side, Shota seemed unperturbed by what had happened, but it was difficult to say, mostly because of his completely bandaged face. The air that had been cooled thoroughly was suddenly heated up and expanded. That's what created this explosion. Present Mike sat back down, looking in the arena. Just how hot was that? Geez, I can't see a thing. A Midnight. Who won the match? Midnight rose slowly, rubbing her head before looking to the right, and, as the smoke dissipated, she saw a figure leaning against the arena wall. After a few moments, she recognized Shoto's red and white hair. Todoroki is out of the ring. She then looked to her left, and was shocked to see Izuku, still in his skeletal form, lying on the ground, where the ring should have been, but nevertheless Shoto had completely destroyed that part. She shifted her gaze towards Cementas, who simply shook his head. With a sigh, she raised both hands. Both Todoroki and Midoriya are out of the ring. This match is a draw. The roar of the crowd couldn't have been more deafening. Well, that was really something else, said Nizu with a smile, while sitting with the other teachers, who nodded at his words. It's been a while since we had a draw like this. If I'm not mistaken, it was when you were a student here, All Might. You completely destroyed the ring with a punch, but it deprived you of a safe landing, so you fell on the ground where the ring should have been. The blonde hero blushed a bit. I was still young, and I didn't even know about the rule that the ring has to be there, otherwise it is counted as out of bounds. Nizu chuckled at him. Well, the rules were all written. You just had to read them. You won that tournament only because in case of a draw the winner was decided with a match of arm wrestling, and it is precisely for that reason that we have changed the rule. And now, in the event of a draw, either of them progresses in the tournament. I keep thinking that it is not wise as a rule. We could find another way to declare a winner, said Snipe, looking at the principal. It would be a waste not to allow one of the two not to advance. It could also be true, but these guys will one day be heroes, and may find themselves in a situation where a draw equates to a defeat, replied Nizu now with a more calm look. I'm sure Midoriya could still fight, but a good hero must think ahead of his actions so as to guarantee a complete victory. In this case, a solid ground on which to land, even if I forgive him, as he was in midair, and the explosion was quite strong. The other teachers nodded, as Photo was taken away by some robots, as he apparently lost consciousness, while Izuku simply stood up and returned to his human form before leaving the arena, with Cementos already recreating the ring. It could have been better, but I would say that it wasn't a bad fight, said Izuku while cracking his neck. President Mike had explained to the public that neither he nor Shoto would go on to the next round, and there was no lack of protests from the spectators. However, Izuku was not disappointed by the result, nor was he angry about the failure to win. That was fine with him. His moment of peace was abruptly interrupted when, turning a corner, he found himself facing Ibara's cold eyes, and the girl didn't seem at all happy, which was no longer a novelty for him. I saw that you lost. Well, it means your eyes work well. And I didn't lose, it was a draw, replied Izuku with an annoyed voice. He wanted to go and relax for a few minutes, but this girl was doing everything to annoy him. That makes me sad. Well, that's unexpected, thought the biker with a raised eyebrow. Because now I can't be the one to defeat you and destroy your sins, hissed Ibara with a glare, and her hair moving slightly behind her. Izuku was on the verge of answering her in a not very polite way when a gloved hand came to rest on Ibara's shoulder. Now Ibara, this isn't the time to think about these. It's a school tournament. You should think about having fun and improving thanks to these matches. She looked at him with worried eyes but no buts, remember that our Lord would never accept this kind of behavior, said the man, who, according to Izuku, had to be American since he looked like a cowboy. Said man then looked at Izuku with a smile. Forgive her words, sometimes she happens to behave this way, but she does it in good faith. Izuku stares at him for a moment before shrugging. It's fine, I guess that, knowing who I am, she doesn't feel very comfortable near me. You can say that, nodded the man before moving the arm for a handshake. I saw your match against that Todoroki boy. I must say that you two are truly exceptional. Izuku was slightly puzzled by his calm behavior, but still shook his hand. Thank you for your words, Oh right, I have not introduced myself. The man chuckled for a moment. I'm Ibara's legal guardian. Izuku's heart skipped a beat when he heard his next words, but the boy couldn't say why. But you can call me Adam. Make different mounts. Tenya Iida, join forces? Izuku nodded. I've already Yayorozu with me, and you could be a good vehicle. What? Just trust me, grinned Izuku before transforming. Now, let's ride. On the sidelines, Momo could only look with pity at Tenya. You have my sincerest condolences. A shiver ran down Tenya's back. I'm scared. Too late. A few minutes later, President Mike announced the start of the event, but the whole stadium was shocked to see whatever that was. Momo, with the band around her head, was sitting on Izuku's shoulders, which was in turn sitting on the shoulders of the one who, according to logic, should have been Tenya, but the latter was different. Let's break these rules, shouted a flaming Tenya with most of his body now made of black metal, with his mufflers that now resembled those of a car out of Fast and Furious. His hair was now completely ruffled and burning, while his eyes were two empty orbits full of fire. Why did it turn this way? Screamed Momo, trying to not fall on the ground. Dunno, but it's fun. No, it's not. Pony Tsunatori, a team with you? Asked the blonde student, tilting her head. Yes, we can also speak both English, and therefore we can understand each other better, nodded Izuku before adding, besides, wouldn't you be interested in getting back at all of the bad things that Monoma made you say? She looked at him for a moment. I'm in. Perfect. Now he grinned. Let's ride. That sounds so bad out of contest, noted Momo with a sigh. A few minutes later, President Mike announced the start of the event, but the whole stadium was shocked to see a somehow different pony girl. Monoma, said boy, looked behind him just to see a bigger pony covered in flames, long horns similar to those of a dragon, and Izuku, and Momo on her back. Tsunatori, come here. My horns want to thank you for all the help you gave me, including the book for Japanese insults. Monoma, it wasn't my kendo, I swear. Come here, you fucking bastard. On the other side of the arena, Ibara looked at her classmate with cold eyes. Language. Fuck you. Oh god, she's the twin of Bakugo. Fuck you, Pikachu. See? Mizo Shoji, a team with you? Yes. Izuku looked at him. I mean, with my power you'll probably change, but I can't say how. Mizo merely shrugged. I'm okay with it. At least I can win if I'm in your team. Good. Izuku and Momo walked toward him. Let's ride. A few minutes later, President Mike announced the start of the event, but the whole stadium noticed that a team was absent, and when President Mike wondered the same thing, Izuku's voice was heard from the stadium speakers. Let no joyful voice be heard. The whole stadium shook for a few moments. Let no man look up at the sky with hope. Long cracks formed in the ground as the temperature increased several degrees. And let this day be cursed by we who are ready to wake. A giant flaming hand appeared from behind the stadium, going to grasp its edge. The Kraken! A giant flaming Kraken Shoji rose in a cloud of smoke and flames with a mighty roar, and Izuku and Momo on his head. Amid the shock and astonishment of the crowd, a female voice thundered, are you by chance a villain? I won't let you win. And so, on the other side of the stadium, Empty Lady appeared, ready to fight. While the two titans began to struggle, For completely invalid reasons, Mineta and Kaminari watched the fight until the smaller of the two set a giant woman against a giant octopus, and we're in Japan. Your point? I read enough hentai to know where this is going, and I like it. The slap from Ajui's tongue could not have been more deserved. The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.